Okay. Now can you tell me about the meltdown, Alex?
Mm-hmm. Like 5 minutes before you texted asking to do a Jordy update, I was like in my head about what happened today, and then realized like, oh wait, I have a 5-year-old that also needs me, and I'm reading stories too, so I couldn't actually have a meltdown. But it was literally right before you had texted about like giving an update.
Okay, and what was
Like,
the meltdown going to
I mean, I
be?
didn't actually fully have the meltdown, but I was just thinking about how sad it is that, I mean, Jordy is like still there in this rehab facility without answers, without like honestly hope right now. And I think that like the trial is still hopeful, but I think that she's going through it. Like Eric, I remember speaking earlier about just like she's in this place, like how much more can she
Well, just like her
make
body, physically, her body's going through a lot right now. And
mentally? But I think this is more mental.
yeah, I mean, she's withdrawing from steroids, which was fine the past two surgeries. And I think there's just like a cumulative effect of how much she's gone through. Like CAR-T, I mean, Hank, you saw her every day of like unable, right? Like that rough CAR-T time, that 10 days in the hospital. And I don't know if she ever fully recovered physically from that. So then to have this steroid withdrawal and a surgery on top of that, I just feel like it's a lot to go through.
Yeah. Also, she is not in a hospital right now. She is in
Right.
a rehab facility. So, like, when she was recovering from the CAR T and at Mass Gen, we literally couldn't have gotten better care. Like, you couldn't have asked
Yeah.
for anything better. And this is a little different because, like, it's a rehab first
Yep.
and a doctor's office in quotes second. And so they're going to be a little more loose and, you know, laissez-faire, I guess you could say, with, you know, recovery and stuff. But like, she's tapering. She had to taper off steroids pretty abruptly. It felt like this was a little more abrupt than it was in the
Yeah.
past.
I mean, some people, it takes them months to
Yeah.
withdraw.
Yeah. And so like her fevers haven't been high when they have been. They've been like 100. Her blood pressure's always been fine. Her vitals have been fine. She had a lot of blood withdrawn from her the day that she started to not feel well. Like everything logically is matching up.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what the doctor was saying too today is like, this is steroid withdrawal. This is not warrant like a brain scan.
Well, think about like, I don't know, like I don't want to do a, you know, 1-to-1 conversion, but like when you're withdrawing from anything like coffee, right?
Yeah,
Like
huge headache.
there is even just going from like 3 cups to 1 cup is a massive deal for a lot of people, me included. And so I can only imagine after brain surgery and getting steroids to help with the swelling and the recovery of your brain, just tapering off of it for the sake of making sure that you get this vaccine.
Right.
That is the next step in, you know, this process is it makes sense. It's just like the one thing that sucks is that it was not really foreseen.
Right. I mean, like, can we go back to just like 2 days
Okay,
ago?
yeah. So a week ago, right, Alex and I released that episode last weekend about how she was not doing so well mentally because it was really hard to accept where she was physically post surgery. But then I think like right the next day, she actually started mentally to get better. She started to physically move her body more. We even saw like, oh my gosh, you're going to be walking really soon. So there was this hope and everyone was in really good spirits. And then she was actually starting the trial, which again was really hopeful. And then she just got so beat up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know what other way there is to say it.
but it beat up. Yeah. Like this
Like
was
physically,
like,
like
yeah,
Physically, her
physically. Yeah, yeah,
body,
yeah,
she's so weak.
But I think it's so she gets to this appointment. Hank, you go with her. She's there 4 hours,
yeah. Mhm.
gets the leukapheresis, and then afterwards she's nauseous. She throws up everywhere, and then she slept for like 30 hours straight.
For those who don't know what a leukapheresis is, it's just like a long a long blood withdrawal. Think like hours. So it could be anywhere from like 2 hours to 6 hours. So for Mass Gen, it was 6. And
Yeah.
for this one, it was about 2.5.
She didn't even get fluids either after. So like
Mm-mm.
again, like what you were saying, Hank, is like it all makes sense why she's feeling ill. It's just really sad to witness.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. Maybe this is just like the realist in me after being with her basically every step of this journey. But like, to think that this trial was just gonna like go smooth sailing was never
Oh,
really an option for me.
yeah.
And I'd rather hit these bumps in the road now than, during the, early stages, knowing, okay, like nothing has happened with the vaccine portion of this yet. The actual trial, the tumor's out of her head. She's starting to move her arm and leg in just over a week, way more than any of us ever thought that she'd be able to.
Yeah, I mean, you see where she was and where she is, and I think
Yeah.
Alex and I worry about where she is and where things.
Could go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think she will get back to being better. I think the steroid withdrawal will take another week for her to be fully okay.
Yeah.
But while she's like unwell physically, like having flu-like symptoms with this withdrawal, she can't be doing PT and OT as much.
So I think that's
That
the tricky
sucks.
part. That's like
Yeah.
kind of what the rehab was saying today is like, if symptoms like this continue, you may have to go back to the hospital because in this rehab facility, we do therapies.
Right.
We're constantly doing therapies. And I think that's the scary part is like,
Well, they were kind of upset with her today. Like not upset, but they were like, "All right, like you already missed one therapy, like can't
well,
miss
yeah.
another." And
But
I get
think
it.
I think there's like a checklist where it's like, if you miss this amount, there
Right.
may be a bed for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is like not her fault, So that's the shitty part.
Yeah. I think that she'll end up being fine. I don't think she'll have to go back to the
I
hospital.
mean, yeah, she's doing better already.
Yeah. And it seems like it's like a roller coaster of feeling good and then feeling bad. It's just like when she's feeling good, we need that to coincide with the therapy time.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that's all that we
I know I got her in a good moment when I saw her today.
I
She
know.
was unwell, and then they gave her some meds, and she had an opening of like 40 minutes where she was doing well. And then Alex, you visited literally 45 minutes later and
And
saw
she was not well.
no.
No. Yeah. She, like the minute I walked in, she was kind of in and out of sleep. And then, we put, like I handed her a banana and she goes, no, no, no. And then I was like, what about an apple? And she goes, okay. Takes a few bites of the apple. And then within minutes, she was like, get me the bag. And then, of course, like I couldn't get the bag in time. So she vomited
Aw.
and
On the blanket that was just that I brought her
on the
today
cozy,
from
cozy
home.
blanket that you
Yeah.
just got over. And yeah, I think it's just hard too. It's like her body couldn't get herself up to vomit either. So like she just like threw up on herself, And
Ugh.
then I was like holding her back over to try to like get the rest of the vomit, off of her. And then of course like nurses came in and they're all very sweet there and she got cleaned and showered but she was just shaking and, uncontrollably a little bit.
Yeah, like the flu.
Yeah. And again, it wasn't like tremors. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? It was just like she was just unwell.
Yeah, she's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she was just in and out of sleep the rest of the time I was there.
I know she was so good like Wednesday. I think like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, she had like a really good 3 days.
I know. And like back up to like after she had the procedure done, and then like the three of us on a text thread being like, we weren't really speaking. And then all of a sudden, Jordy hearted a picture of Brody and Hank. And then we're all like, Jordy,
Oh my
she's
God.
alive, babe. Hi. And then we all FaceTimed for like an hour.
Because we hadn't heard from her Hank, you were there and she was sleeping, but Alex and I hadn't heard from her in like 30 hours. And we knew that she was physically
Yeah,
not doing so
right.
well, but
Like we knew what was happening the whole time because you would tell us, but like finally Jordy hearted a picture and
like she's
within
okay enough.
seconds we were just like, there she
Jordy
is.
Jordy was like, that's so ridiculous. She's like, I honestly didn't even know
Right.
like why you guys were freaking out.
She was just sleeping for so long.
I was surprised that her phone was even charged.
Oh, well, so it wasn't this morning. So
Okay.
I called her and I guess when her phone's off, I thought like she didn't pay her phone bill or something. And then I got there and it was just needed to be charged. So charged
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think that there was going to be at least, one of these moments in rehab, whether it was more physical in the therapy or the, recovery of, treatment. Um, it was just like, yeah, unrealistic for me to think like after I saw her after surgery that everything was just going to go as planned
So Hank,
in
for you,
therapy.
like this seems more like okay, like this is a little bit more expected on
Yeah,
your end, or like I don't know, like I mean, I think Alex and I are like on the side freaking out a bit more.
I'm not really freaking
How do you remain calm?
Calm?
out.
And I don't mean that like, I don't mean it like as if like Eric and I are always freaking out, although
Right.
like sometimes we do on the side. But you constantly portray this like realistic, logical mindset.
Calm.
But that's always how I've been.
I know.
It's
How?
crazy. But even in
I
moments
don't
of
know.
crisis, it's like,
Yeah, it's just by this point, I've gone through enough to know kind of like when to be alarmed and when to not. And like for some reason, even though there's been a lot going on with this particular past couple to few weeks, nothing has been alarming to me. Everything has made sense and nothing seems fatal.
Yeah.
And that's all that I really care about. And so, like, as long as the tumor's out of her head, as long as she's still eligible for this trial, as long as, you know, like those two things are intact, like, I have no reason to stay like anything other than just like calm.
Well,
wow,
that's
yeah,
good.
I know.
Alex and I should call you more.
I know that sounds like insane, but it's also like the alternative for me, and I've thought about it, is like breaking down, having a mental
Right.
breakdown,
I was
Yeah,
just
the
about to
going
say,
alternative.
what's the
nuts. Like,
alternative? Like you run away? Like, no, you know?
no, obviously not. I wouldn't run away, but it'd be more of
Yeah, the
just
alternative
like
is like crying and
be
just
more emotional,
yeah,
but going to therapy, being in cancer support groups, that stuff
right.
helps a lot because it helps ground me, particularly in my situation. But I've always thought about, okay, so like what is the alternative if I want to act that way? And like just mapping that out in my head has just always been like, why would that ever be worth it? Right? Like, why would I try to not put whatever's in the best interest of my son first? Like, the last thing I want to do is make this about me. I want
Yeah.
to make sure that like Jordy's entire support system, me included, is like as cohesive and like, especially coming from like a sports background, it's like I know a lot of like, this is going to sound so cheesy, but like coaching profiles and like different sports and how different people manage and stuff. And like, I've always resonated more with the like less dictator authoritarian type of coach and more of the, hey, like you're working with me, you're not working for me type of
Yeah.
attitude and mentality. And like, to me, that just like conveys like, whether I like it or not, like I'm the kind of the central nervous system and the caregiver support
Yeah.
system in this. Like I connect all the dots. Everybody
Right.
usually funnels their, I usually have to funnel information to everybody. And I'd rather do it in a more calm, supporting manner than just like, don't talk to me or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
brash or reactionary. And I feel like that always helps.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes
So
sense.
it's almost like, you know, it's taking like, I guess, leadership skills, I guess you can say. And
I mean,
like,
sure, there's so many things to navigate here.
right. And like, I'm not trying to like become like ridiculously outlandish because like it wouldn't even help me, let alone help anybody else.
Right.
And so like, this all makes sense is like the thing that I always like
Yeah, I
go
think I'm
back
on the
to.
other side. I'm like, none of this makes sense. So then everything is,
Right.
but I get
You're
it,
speaking
Hank.
more
Like,
figuratively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes.
Right.
So, and I mean, I think that's just like how also like our brains work.
But I will say the other thing, and this has been a big thing for therapy for me that I think that we're completely different on, is that you guys always zoom out and I'm always focused on like the present.
Which is like probably better.
Yeah, I know it is. Like it was the first thing that therapy told me to do was like, hey, like just because this stuff happened in the past and there's stuff that might happen in the future doesn't not, it also means that the present is the most important.
Right.
So
Yeah,
just think of it in that lens. Like,
it's hard not to like make interpretations or
I
like think
know,
about
because
what
like
does this mean for the future.
every time I hear you guys talk on the phone, it always goes back to, wow, like can't believe you're in this situation. This is so fucked up, like,
But I also think
etc.
that's really validating for her because she's thinking
100%,
those thoughts. Yeah.
100%. I'm not saying
Like
that
if she
that's like the
wasn't
right or
there,
wrong way. It's just like
yeah,
that's never my lens of
sure.
thinking with her. It's
That's fair.
I mean, that's why she has friends that she can do that with and a partner that keeps her
yeah.
Yeah.
grounded.
Yeah, and like I'm cool to do that with her too, and I have done that with her
Yeah.
plenty, but it's never like a central talking point. It's always more just like
Yes, we know that
let's
one.
fit
Because she'll
let's
be like,
fit
Hank just thinks he's just so happy the tumor's out.
it's
And I think like
true.
hearing that enough over time was grounding for her. But like in the moment of the chaos of like, how the fuck did I get
So
here? Then
Right. We just said Dr.
right.
Lee,
So
which
yeah.
so I kept coming back to that because she kept like she was at like one of her lowest points when she first entered the rehab. And I was like, I'll take this any day of the week if it means that your tumor's out. Like
Right.
don't don't sugarcoat that. Like that's not like even close for me. And
you're
like
talking about the not walking and moving.
yeah.
Yeah. That's how Hank. Yeah. And I'm
Maybe
just
we
like,
were the
what the
opposite
hell?
way. We were like,
Yeah.
yeah, we get it.
It's not that I don't not get it. It's that like I'm looking from like a science medical
No, we know.
lens,
We know.
Yeah.
which is like tumor out equals live longer.
Yeah. And
Right.
it was like giving her a seizure. Like she was unwell with
Her
the tumor
seizures were
in her head.
bad. They were bad
Yeah.
for me. They were
Yeah.
extremely bad for me because all of a sudden I hear her call my name out of nowhere and I knew
Oh,
exactly what I
God.
meant. And
Hank,
like
that's like terrible.
I had to like put Brody in a different room or
Yeah.
whatever I had to do. Like that stuff's not worth it. Get the tumor out of your head and we'll deal with the repercussions from that. Like you're
Right.
healthier without a tumor in your head if we can get it out. Like
Yeah.
It's just like
yeah.
sometimes really hard. I mean, I think for her too, it's like, she can't do anything right now. And like having someone like walk her to the bathroom and, wipe her or shower
She
her.
can wipe herself now.
Okay. Well, she
Hey.
couldn't, early on.
Yeah, but now she can.
Now she
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty, I mean, this is like her worst case of like not being able to be fully independent. She said like last week, she didn't like asking you to get her like peanut butter and crackers when she was tired.
I mean, she doesn't even like calling for the nurse when she has to pee.
I know.
Oh, I think in the hospital I called the nurse button more than she did. And I was like I was only there like 30% of the time.
Right.
Yeah, the independence thing is like a huge thing. It reminds me of like so I don't know. We all have like grandparents and stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't know whose specific grandparents on which side are still living or not. But like, you see that like sense of independence leave them
Yep.
whether they are with assisted living or not, and there are things that I've seen. I now like can pinpoint when I was growing up, like when my family had to take the car keys away from my grandma or anything like that. And like my mind goes back to that when I think about her and talking about that now. And she's
Right.
doing it at such an earlier age
Right.
that it's like that it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.
But like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there's been no permanent damage done.
Right.
Zero.
Right.
Like they got an entire tumor out of her brain, and there will be a little bit of a road to recovery. We don't know how long that will be, guys. I wish I could tell you.
Yeah, no.
We have a scheduled discharge date. We are not going to tell you that right now, for privacy's sake, and then also because we
Well, it
don't
could
know.
change.
Yeah, that's why, because it's
Yeah.
fluid. And then there will be a plan for her to continue outpatient physical therapy outside of it, but like she's coming home
Yeah.
and she's going to sleep in her bed and she's going to hug her son and she's going to pet her dogs and she's going to pee in her own toilet.
Yeah, life
Right.
will resume.
Exactly. And that's like, I know that's like a weird thing to like cap this up on, but like that's that's what she's looking forward to. It's what we're all looking forward to. And
Yeah.
like, isn't it crazy to think about how much things have changed since she
Yes.
was diagnosed?
Yes.
Like
So
in all of
much.
our lives? It's crazy.
So much has happened.
So much has happened. But I do want to thank like all of the support that's been out there, both internally in our family and friend groups, and then externally within like, the podcast audience and whatnot. I can't tell you how much that means to both Jordy, to myself, to the, everybody who
Yeah.
surrounds her. And yeah, I guess you guys like those Instagram stories enough to the point where I kind of have to do them a little more often. But yeah, like the support means everything. We're going to continue putting stuff out as much as we possibly can. And yeah, like just like follow us on Instagram for the latest updates. Follow us on TikTok. Those are the two main, right? We have a website. Shout out to Natalie for designing it. And yeah, we kind of wanted to give you this intro before I cut up an episode. But so I haven't really told you what I wanted to do this week, but
Oh, well, I kind of
you
know what
kind
you're
of know.
doing.
So Jordy and Erica have, it's really, really weird. When we started the podcast, it was kind of eerie how many friends that we have. I'm trying to word this very lightly.
Whose dads have died.
Whose dads have died. I've tried to word it lightly, and you just said nah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the truth. It's really terrible.
Yeah. So we have two friends. One is Ryan Kahn, who used to work with Jordy before she went back into therapy.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. I feel like nervous because I've listened to all of your episodes. I'm like a super fan
Oh,
of
that's
this podcast.
so sweet.
Super
So sweet.
fan, truly. And all of your guests have been so like different and so poignant and like bring so much to the table. Like, yeah.
And then another friend is Nicole Thompson, a longtime friend from middle school, high school days who we're still very close with.
All right, Nicole. Well, normally when you come over here, we're just like hanging out on Wednesday.
I'm holding babies.
And holding babies. And I think Jordan and I were talking about this, and like we actually like don't know at all about like the story of your dad. Really, like
Yeah.
we know like some facts, but
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But both lost their dads at different times in their lives. But we don't know much about it, even though we knew it pretty quickly in our friendships. And so like hearing them talk about it is going to be really interesting. And I want to try to like interweave these stories to see if we could like do something a little cool and like kind of like make something a little more meaningful by combining their stories. So thank you to Ryan and Nicole for joining. Yeah, it's in hearing it so far, it's been super interesting. And like Jordy's going to throw an absolute fit when she's healthy. And it's like, you took how much time to do this? But yeah, I think it's pretty cool to hear them so vulnerable about this. And like, like I've always been curious and I've been unable to figure out how to bring it up with both of them. Yeah.
I would have just asked.
You would just ask?
Feels weird.
Right. That's exactly right. And the thing is, like, this far into our friendship with Nicole,
It feels weird to
I
ask.
I find it awkward and a little uncomfortable to be like, oh, by the way, how did your dad die? I would love to
Sure,
know.
sure, sure. Yeah.
Ryan a little less, just because she's an open book. But like, I feel like I've never heard Nicole talk about her dad once. I just started listening to it. There's some interesting kind of like connection points that are made between both of them. So I'm going to cut in and out of both interviews. So yeah, there was a super interesting theme that I found pretty early in both of their interviews, which is both of them talking about organ donation way earlier than I expected them to. Like before even like how they were feeling post death and stuff like that. So like, right. And so like weaving this is going to be fun. But again, apologies for the audio differences. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week.
How do you have time, Hank?
What do you mean?
Just how do you have time?
The way this came about is that you said you were excited about our podcast.
I was super
And
fan.
I put out like a poll, like asking people like, hey, what do you want to hear about? And Ryan was like, I'd love to hear from someone who like lost their parent in their 20s. And I'm like, okay.
That was you.
Do you want to come on and talk about that? And she so graciously said yes.
Oh, I was so honored. I'm so grateful to be
so
here.
I'm so glad you're here and just grateful that you're willing to like share your story with us because this is like, you know, hopefully a safe space for people. But yeah, I'm glad that you were open to it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like excited. I was telling all my friends, I was like, I'm like low-key getting a really sick free therapy session right now that's just like being recorded. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
I love it.
Stoked.
But when Jordy told me, I guess we all went to the same middle school, but when Jordy told me that you were talking about losing your parent, I was like, wow, we actually have a lot of friends who have lost a parent.
Yes.
And so I didn't think I realized that until we were kind of surveying our friends.
Isn't it weird? It's like
Yeah.
you don't realize, and then all of a sudden it's like,
Well, it's like I
whoa.
know it. Like I know that that's part of their story, but like I've never sat down with them and like talked it through.
Yeah, like had an intentional
Yeah, like
conversation.
had an intentional conversation about it, you know, like
Well, because it's normally not like, hey, like let's grab drinks. So what was it like when your dad died? That sucked, right? Like that's a weird one.
right. So it's like I know it's part of their story and like I'm sensitive to that, but I've never like sat down and talked about it. So
Totally.
we're here to sit down and have a real conversation about your dad.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's crazy that you bring that up that like people, you don't realize how many
Yeah.
people have lost a parent. My brother is 28. We're 3 years apart. And our dad died right before my brother graduated from college. And then his roommate's dad died
Wow.
like a year after that, like dropped dead of a heart attack.
That's
And
crazy.
it's like not funny, but it's funny. So he has like a group text with all of his friends who have a dead parent.
Wow.
And it's called the Oneers.
Oh my god.
It's like the club nobody wants to be part of, but it's like kind of exclusive.
Yes.
The Oneers.
Yeah.
Oneers.
But
I
then
mean-
one of them died, like one of the kids.
No.
Isn't that super fucked?
That's so fucked.
Yeah, he got hit by a truck riding a bicycle in, Brandon's going to be upset with me. I believe it was Uzbekistan because he's like traveling the world and was like this amazing biker and
That is
like
so
doing
tragic.
sad.
farming. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Life's just, it's just,
I know.
but then it's like, I'm like laughing, not because it's funny,
No.
but because it's like, that's
So
how you
fucked
like,
up.
yeah. And it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to be like, oh shit, like that's a,
Well, I'm just like thinking about like it's so messed up, but then I'm like, oh, like they have this text group already established.
totally.
Right? So now it's like they have this place they can go to like also mourn the death of their friend.
It's so true.
That maybe wouldn't have existed had they not all like come together and shared about their parents.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like they, when their friends' parents die, they get added to the text group.
I was just gonna
So
say
there's
I
like-
have friends to be added to the
like,
Oneers.
we have people that need to get added to this group.
I'll ask if he's accepting,
accepting new members.
applications, but it's like he's like, yeah, it's kind of weird, but you know, it passed away, and then it's like, well, welcome to this text.
I mean, so my dad passed away in 2001. It was very sudden. He had a heart attack at our house. I was home. My brother was home. My mom was home. We were all home. It's oddly one of the nights, like I wouldn't remember anything that happened during that day. I wouldn't remember like anything the next day, but the actual like hours of it happening, I remember, but it was really quick. And my mom went to the hospital, the fire department came, the paramedics came, it was a whole, scene. And, he was gone really fast. And, I remember like my mom's friend came over to watch us. She went to the hospital. My brother was really, really little. And I just remember like I just remember being like not doing anything, just like numb, like stone cold.
Where were you? Like in your house?
I was in the kitchen.
And where was he?
He was taking out the trash.
Wow.
So he was in like my front driveway, and I was in the kitchen, and my brother was like in the kitchen. I was making like these like long raviolis.
Oh, wow, you like remember?
And yeah. It's eerie how vividly I remember. Yeah. And my mom came running into the house and said, I need to call 911. And then I didn't see him. Like I didn't go like he was like by the trash cans.
And did he like fall to the floor?
Yeah. Like he was just, I don't know if he was heading to the trash cans or coming back from the trash cans. He just had a massive heart attack.
Oh my God.
And so the paramedics came and then my mom's friend came, and then eventually my mom came back and,
do you remember how she told you?
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, where do I start? So my dad and I were really close. He was cool. He was fucking nuts. Like, he was a totally like unhinged person in the best way. Like, he was just like, he used to refer to himself as the CEO, the chief entertainment officer.
Oh, so he's like
cute.
a good time.
He was a good time. Yeah, but he was like he was very serious. He was very like, he was pretty like harsh with me and my brother, but like also he was like, you just have to tell me if you do something bad, because whatever you've done, like I've done worse. And the only time you're going to be in trouble is like if you lie to me.
Oh, wow.
So I hope that that's how I am with my future.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a very open relationship.
Yeah, except for that it was still like really scary, because he's over here like, just don't lie to me and you'll be fine. And I'm like, I feel like I'm
Not going to be
not
fine.
going to
Yeah,
be
you're
fine
like, what's
at
gonna
all.
happen?
But we were really, really close. He was in sales too, forever. I don't know if he would like love that I'm in. He was always like, well, no, I don't know about that. And then I was like, maybe I'll go to law school. And he was like, no, I wanted to go to law school, and that was a bad idea. And I was like, okay, well, I want to be like a musical theater singer. And he was like, well, that's like totally. I'm like, well, I'm running out of like
ideas.
Right.
I'm like, how about we have like fewer no's and more like suggestions. But so yeah, it's like I don't even know how to like describe
I know
him.
it's hard because
is.
you have spent your entire life with him, and so
Yeah.
then how to like sum up your relationship with someone in a few sentences is like impossible.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing, he was like, I love talking so much, and he loved talking like more than I love talking, and he would call me, he'd be like, you're overly animated, which was his way of being like, you're taking up too much of this conversation. And I was like,
You're like, not. Was he also overly animated?
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but like more articulate and like had like a lower voice, so it was probably less like abrasive.
Yeah, but he like saw himself in you. It sounds like.
Oh, for sure. And
Yeah.
for sure. And I think that like totally freaked him out, like in
Yeah.
hindsight.
I think it's like hard either way. Like if you have a kid, like Jordy with you, you're like, I don't know who this kid is, but it doesn't feel like an extension of me at all.
Really? That's how you feel about
Yeah.
Because
I
he's
didn't
like
know that.
I'm like much more reserved. I'm more of an introvert. Like I would prefer to be a fly on the wall, blend in, and my kid is like, I'm here and I want to put on a show for you. And
Do you see Hank in him?
no. Hank and I are both like so chill and like
And he says hi to everyone.
he
That's
says
why
hi to everyone. I'm like, I want to go into the market with my head down. Nobody talk to me. And I want to get back in my car as soon as I possibly can.
So, like,
and Brody's like, hi.
I love Brody. I can like feel myself. I'm like, I love to make friends
like, I
and
get it.
talk. But so I feel like that's also hard.
That's so funny.
And then
and your daughter is also.
She's opposite of me too.
She's like shy and like
Although I was shy.
How far apart are
they're
10
10
weeks.
weeks apart.
I'm like, is there a possible switched at birth? Like, was that
Like,
like
what happened here?
No,
Like, is
definitely
there
not
a-
switched to birth, but but like could have been.
Yeah. So
Like,
it's
the personality
interesting when
is
like you're so different.
Yeah.
And then I think on the other end, it's also so hard when you're so alike.
similar.
But we were so different in so many ways too, like so different.
Yeah.
I think that he wanted like a very different life for me than the one that I have now, because like I was like his little angel princess, you know,
Yeah.
and he wanted me to be, not that I'm like not taken care of, like I'm married, my husband
Yeah.
rocks, like he's very cool, and like I have a great family.
Yep.
But I've always been like, oh, like I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something that like enables me to take care of myself and like
Yeah.
whoever else I choose to bring into the world.
Right.
And he was very like, oh, you know, like just wanted me to be like taken care of.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're so like independent and like ambitious.
I think it was
and-
like, who was it? I think it was maybe, I'm going to get this wrong. It was like Cher. And she was like, oh, my mom said, you know, when are you going to like settle down and marry a rich man? And she was like, Mom, I am a rich man. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I
Yeah.
feel. You know?
yes.
I feel like that's a generational thing too.
Oh,
Yes.
100%. 100%. I don't know. Maybe it's easier for me to start with like his kind of like, I think in like explaining his like illness and what happened
Yeah.
to him, I think you'll like understand
Yeah.
more about him. So the reason why I bring up that he like loved to talk, like that was like a huge part of his personality. And he was like the most fun person in the room, but
Yeah.
also like he wasn't like, he went to college, but he didn't graduate. He went to UCLA and didn't finish because he started his own company. It wasn't like he was like particularly educated, but he just like
Yeah.
knew everything.
Yeah.
And every
So
time
it's like an entrepreneur mindset.
100%. And every time you'd be like, I think that's garbage. Like, I think that's bullshit. Then it would end up being true. And it was like, dude.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know all of this?
Yeah. And it was just like weird, like relevant, but like weird stuff. And so he
Yeah.
was always like really present in every conversation. So like keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So my dad died of something that we think was called corticobasal degeneration. It's kind of similar to ALS.
Okay.
It's very similar to ALS, but it's not. And it's why I say we maybe think it's because like the only formal diagnosis is on autopsy,
Yeah.
Oh.
which we didn't do because we wanted to donate his brain to science. He wanted to donate his brain
Yeah.
to science.
Which is hard too because like the closure piece.
Yeah, you don't get those answers.
But we couldn't donate his brain to science because when he was in effectively hospice, I'm like jumping around here, but when he was like in hospice, my brother and I were calling like UPenn, Chicago, like NYU, like Lingo, like who's going to take this brain? And they were like, oh, you have to set it up way ahead of time. We were like, what is that? We were like,
What?
Like, how are you supposed to know that?
like, what is that? What is that about? Right?
Okay, that literally makes no sense.
No sense. And so then they were like, they were like, if you want to do a private autopsy, you can. But we knew it wasn't genetic. So we were like, we don't
Yeah.
really, like,
Yeah.
that's not the point. Like, the
Right,
point
that-
was to help.
Research.
Yeah, research. Exactly. So,
That's so disappointing.
yeah.
I don't remember the exact words. I remember the first thing I thought though, which was I just assumed he was going to be an organ donor, and I was like, okay, he's going to save other people.
Oh.
And that was like the first thing I thought.
That was the
Which,
first thing that came
like,
to your mind.
That was the first thing I thought. I'll like never forget
That's
thinking
wild.
that. Not as a 9-year-old, I'm not fully like understanding like how organ donation
Right.
or anything like that. But that was like the first thing I thought. I was like, okay, he's in it. And then, from then on, it was all like a total blur.
Wow.
But
I'm like sort of shocked that you knew the concept of organ donation at 9 years old.
yeah, I couldn't even tell you where it came from. I couldn't even tell you. I'm sure I got it from something I may have been like watching on TV or like heard it or did something, because I don't know where it would have come from, and I don't remember vocalizing it.
Yeah.
I just remember like standing there and like being in our living room by like our kind of bigger windows and walking around and just like telling myself that. And then I think it was probably relatively fleeting. And then, I don't remember pretty much like anything up until like our funeral.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was just, it's crazy. And
It's
then
like you have like these like such vivid memories and like no memories. It's
Yeah.
like insane how our brains can like protect us in
Yeah.
ways.
Mhm.
I think the most shocking, for the most part, the most shocking parts of the evening are what I remember most, which is like my mom running in
Yeah.
and saying she needs to call 911. And then my first thought kind of after.
Yeah.
But the kind of the in between, yeah, I think it was probably like my brain like protecting me to a point.
Right.
And then I just have these like couple quick memories. My brother was 4 or 5, he really has no. So yeah, it was definitely, it was one of those like shocking, very quick out of nowhere type things. And then my mom was a single mom just like that.
Yeah. Well, I remember when me and Erica started talking about how we were going to do this podcast, and I think it was you who said to us, like, have you thought about the difference between like a sudden death and like an anticipated death? And I was like, that wasn't even something that had crossed my mind before you had said it. And I was like, oh wow, like how different those experiences are when like something is so sudden and shocking versus having time to like prepare for it. Like I don't know that one is necessarily easier than the other, but it just seems like such a different experience to like go from everything is normal one day and then your whole life is completely different the next day, especially as a kid.
Yeah, totally. I think that, and that's one of the things that when I started going to my grief group, and I started volunteering for my grief group, it's something that I noticed, just how different kids, especially because it's who I worked with, handled their grief depending on kind of how their person died. And it's different for, for everybody. But for me, it was, certainly a different type of shocking than it may be for someone that has a person that is more of like an anticipated.
Yeah.
Right. Like
death.
the shock factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, how did you like even go to school the next day?
I had, I honestly, and I was with my mom last night and I should have asked her this, but I didn't. I don't necessarily remember how long I stayed home from school. I was in 3rd grade and I remember all the kids in my class made me papers and cards and all these really nice things. And I remember them being, there were a lot of people at my house all the time. And, I think, and I'm kind of this way now, is I don't remember feeling extremely, upset. I think when like I went back to school and of course, you're surrounded by other 9-year-olds and they want to ask you about it. But I don't particularly remember feeling, upset or being sad when I talk about it. It was just kind of like, my dad died and, my mom may have a different memory of that. But, and that's kind of how I think I've gone through my process is I think what it boils down to is I'm one to not like people to feel uncomfortable or even like me to feel uncomfortable. And so anytime I've brought it up, I'm very just like, yes, like my dad passed away and I don't find myself getting emotional about it. I don't remember feeling very emotional about it. And I think it's a shock, like that just hasn't, it could be a shock that still maybe like hasn't fully worn off, right? Cause it's like, you're kind of like not paralyzed in your feelings, but it's still just like this embedded type of shock. So I'm always totally, I feel really okay talking about it and I like talking about it. I like bringing him up and things like that. But it's, I think just a shock that never really goes away. And when it comes to grief, that grief never really, it doesn't necessarily leave you. You work through it. You don't get over it. Yeah. And so I think that how I feel in my own experience, given the intense shock for that as to how it happened versus someone that maybe went through it with a more expected or a little more anticipated, it's different. And everyone's journey is different. Like I'm just speaking for myself, but that's kind of the most prevalent feeling that I remember having and just the way that I acted immediately after my mom went in the house and immediately after I found out that he passed away was the shock. Yeah. Yeah. Which prevented me from kind of feeling my feels of the time.
I mean, you and Hank are similar. Like it reminds me from our episode last week where he said like he didn't want anyone to think of him like as a sad puppy. And you're like, I don't want, and I think that's like you walk into any room and just like make it better. And you're just like have such like a positive sunshine. yeah, like you are sunshine.
It's very
Like,
nice of you.
yeah, but I also think the con to that maybe is
Yeah.
like you don't want anyone to feel negative. Like, so like you keep it
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah.
So we think it was corticobasal degeneration, which is degeneration in the front temporal lobe and at the base of the brain, and
Okay.
causes a lot of symptoms similar to ALS. But the way that it started was right before I went away to college. I grew up in LA, went to college in New York. And I was like, I literally tricked myself into going away to school. I applied to 17 colleges
Wow.
and universities, all out of state.
Wow.
Because I knew if I got in anywhere close to home,
You would say.
I would stay. Even
Yeah.
if it was like, you've been accepted to Gutter University. I would have
Yeah.
been like, Gutter, here I come. baby. Like, so I was freaked out, and I was going away to school, and we were like getting ready, whatever, and we were having like a lunch or a dinner or something with like our really good family friends in New York, who was my dad's really good friend, and he also has a degenerative terminal illness. He has FSH, which is like an extreme form of muscular dystrophy.
Wow.
Okay.
And my dad was talking to him and was like, I'm having this weird thing with my speech. Like, I'm hearing myself stutter and slur. And he'd been telling us this like all
Yeah.
summer.
But you've never
But
heard
you
it?
couldn't hear it?
We couldn't hear it.
Okay.
But because he talked all the time, he was so articulate.
Yeah.
Like, he was the kind of person who would record his outbound voicemail like 15 times until
Wow.
like
It sounded
my
perfect.
outbound voicemail is verbatim his outbound voicemail
Wow.
because it's like, hello,
Ingrained
this is
in you?
Ryan Kahn. I'm currently unavailable to take your call, but if you leave your name, number, and a brief message, I'll respond to your call as soon as possible.
Wow,
Thanks,
I
and
mean,
have a
you've
great day.
perfected that.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
yeah.
I've heard it like 100,000 times, and it's
Yeah.
like, that's like a weird, I don't know, like that will
Yeah.
always be my outbound voicemail.
Yeah.
'cause
Of
then
It's like a
It reminds
connection to
you.
your
yeah,
dad.
exactly. But so he was so articulate. And so over the summer, we were like, he kept being like, do you hear my speech? We were like, no. What? And we thought maybe it was like he was stressed because I was stressed going
Right.
away to school or whatever. And then we were like, but we couldn't hear anything. And he kept saying like, I have like a slur. I'm like
That's
kind of
so
stuttering.
weird.
So
I can't like
that must be
imagine what
so
that's like for
confusing.
him.
And it was like this like verbal tick of my dad's almost, where we'd be at dinner with friends and he'd be like, do you hear my speech? And everyone would be like, no.
That must have made him feel like
Crazy.
kind of crazy.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
And
like-
so he, and you know, he wasn't, luckily he wasn't like afraid of doctors or anything, and he
Yeah.
had great care at UCLA. So he went to his primary care physician and, you know, expressed his concerns, and they did a bunch of scans, and they were like, dude, you're good. Like, there's nothing going
Wow.
on here. Like, it's totally psychological.
Oh no.
Mm-hmm. So they sent him through like all of, you know, they sent him to therapy.
And
he was like, and he should have been in therapy for
Sure.
sure.
like it
It's
wasn't
helpful.
a bad recommendation, but it wasn't the solution here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it
Yeah.
should have been like a total, yeah, but it was like trying to, you know, and he was fucking pissed because he was like, no, dude, like
Right, you
this
probably
isn't
felt so dismissed.
totally. But I
Yeah.
think he also wanted to think that
But it was psychological.
right. That would have
Right.
been a total best case
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
So this conversation that we were having at our family friend's house, like right as he was dropping me off for school, because the friend has a terminal illness and their sister-in-law passed away from ALS. He was like, dude, that's not like normal. If you really think that there's something, you should continue to get it checked.
Which is so wild that someone like him is saying that versus the medical profession.
Right.
And it's only because he had seen it and his wife's sister.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like the doctors aren't saying anything, but it's like someone who has this like lived experience can point it out.
Yeah, it's so true.
It was like great and also kind of scary.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so that went on for like a while. Like I pretty much like all through college, it was just like,
Oh, it's like years.
yeah, like a year or two. It was
Wow.
first like no one could really hear it. And then I would say like partway through college, it was like, oh yeah, like when he would start drinking, he liked to drink Grey Goose, shaken hard up with a twist, in case anyone was wondering. And he like, but it was like he would have a drink, and he was like a big guy, so it's like he was not
Yeah.
a lightweight, and
Yeah.
he would sound like smashed. That was like what would happen. But he was totally coherent. It wasn't,
Yeah.
but it would like exacerbate the slurring and the what
Yeah.
have you.
So when people started to actually hear it,
Yeah.
what do you remember like what went on for him when someone said for the first time, like, oh, I do hear that?
Yeah, he was like, oh yeah, like it's just like you know what? Actually, now that you say that, I don't really remember what people like. I remember people being like, oh yeah, I do hear that, but I
Yeah.
don't remember what he said.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, like
That's
I
a
wonder
really
what it
interesting-
felt like to like get validation that like it wasn't just in his head.
Yeah.
I'm wondering like how, so it sounds like for you, not wanting to make other people feel uncomfortable and sort of like the shock of it have been like at the top of your mind. I'm wondering for your brother, for your mom, for other people who were close to your dad, did their process look similar, different?
So my brother, not so much. I think he was so young. I think that, he and I have never really like actually like spoken about it very much. I mean, it's just, I think for him, it's something that happened and is something that's really sad. And, the memories that like he has of him, that he can remember, he totally has. But my mom, she, she's much more emotional when she speaks about him. And I couldn't, being married, like I couldn't even imagine losing like your partner or your spouse in any way, shape or form, but in such like a shocking manner. And then, being the one to find them. I think it's like she, that I can never understand or imagine to understand what she went through, what she continuously goes through. But I know, at like my bridal shower and at the wedding, we like to bring up his memory as much as possible. And she tends to get pretty emotional pretty
that's
quickly.
when I was like, oh, wait, when at your bridal shower, it's like, that's when I realized, I've never actually talked to you about your dad.
Yeah.
And like, and it was like, it was like such an emotional moment.
Yeah.
For me to hear her.
Yeah. And, for me, it's one of those things where I feel for her just so much when she goes through kind of those emotional times. And it means so much to me to see her still feel these big feelings about my dad, even though my stepdad's incredible and we have this great family. But I, it in a way, like it doesn't make me emotional still, even seeing her be upset. And I think it's still like, she and I just feel our big feelings in kind of different ways. But about I think my dad passed away in January of 2001 and I started in my grief group in April. And so and one of the reasons why I started a few months later was because it needed to kind of be figured out how I would be handling the grief. If a grief group would be an appropriate place for me, if I thought it would be, or, if my mom thought that I would be comfortable, if I felt comfortable, or if maybe one-on-one, or maybe, I wasn't ready for any kind of, grief therapy or anything like that. So, I started in April and I think everyone handles their grief in their own way, but my path to healing was significantly accelerated by being in a group of 10 kids that were between the ages of 7 and 10 that all had gone through a similar thing. And so I don't know if we like want to talk about the group or like my experience or what it was kind of like or whatever,
Well, yeah, we can go that. I also have questions for you.
Okay, great.
Like on the days where like you felt like your dad like should have been there.
Yeah.
Like, do you think about it? Like your wedding day or when you got engaged, like, do you like think about him in that way? Or is it more so when you're like, I have like a dad who died? Like, I don't know. I guess just how does it come up for you? I
think that I always want to think of ways in these situations. So like when I first got engaged, one of the first things I thought of was how do I want to honor my dad at the wedding, right? But I'm really fortunate that I have a stepdad that really does feel like a second dad. And, when my dad passed away, I was 9. So I was still relatively young. And I think that you're in a different emotional and just emotional intelligence when you're that young versus, being in your teens or being in a young adulthood. And so I think that for me, it was less like my dad should be here for this. And it's more, how do I incorporate him? How do I honor him?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that, as like I continue through life and do things, like I even noticed it through when I was graduating college and things like that. It's one of those where like, of course, like I wish my dad, could be here. Like this is a huge accomplishment, but I have such an awesome kind of second dad in Lee that it just, I feel like I have a really, full and complete family, which is really nice. But it's always something in the back of my mind. And I think that for the wedding, I got like a little picture of the two of us and put it on my bouquet. And I think that that's something that like, if I hadn't done, I would have been upset about. And I would have been, I think, and I, so I'm really glad that I did that. But yeah, it's more of like how do I honor him? How do I make sure that he's incorporated? Because pretty much, I feel differently. I feel differently about it. I feel like I want to do these things in like a subtle way, like putting a picture of us in a bouquet. And I think that's a testament to how I've been handling the grief and how I handle it, where I don't want anyone to feel, uncomfortable. I don't want it. And I'm not
like
saying
you weren't
anyone
gonna
would
put up like a montage at their wedding.
Right. Like no one, and I don't think anyone, like would feel uncomfortable if you were to do something like that. But for me, I feel more comfortable doing it in more of like an intimate, like subtle way. So I think it's on brand with how I have handled his death and handled, kind of growing up without him. But my mom and my stepdad met about 8 months after I started my grief group in grief group.
Wow.
Oh, they met in the grief group.
Yeah.
Wow.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So they met at our grief group. Lee's wife had passed away from cancer. So they met at the grief group.
That's
like 8 months
wild.
ago. Yeah.
Wow. So do you remember when they got together?
Yeah. We would go to Korean barbecue.
Naturally. when you go through grief, you go to Korean barbecue.
We would go to group. Yeah, we would go to group, and we would go to the West LA location of our grief group. And then we would go to, it was like Gayukaku.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only family friendly Korean barbecue that I know about.
Yeah. We would go to Gayukaku.
Well, you were also away at school when this is happening, right?
Yes, but I can't and my dad came to visit me a lot because I had a hard time. I mean, I was calling being like, if I don't get to come home, like my first year, I was like, if I don't get to come home, like I'll never be the same. And he kind of was like, yeah, dude, like you're gonna be fine. And I remember he came to visit me and he told me later, like I like got off the train to like meet him. And he was like, you looked like a woman. And like I still like think about that sometimes.
Really
so
and then I'm like pissed that I don't have the sweater that I was wearing because I'm like, man, I must have looked like so cute in that sweater, you know?
Right.
But so my college graduation, we went out for like burgers after, and this was like, it was pretty pronounced at this point. We were just kind of like used to it. And at this point, like the doctors were like, okay, something is up. We maybe see like a little something in your scan, but they ruled out.
This is like a brain scan.
This is like a brain scan. This is like, and he did a spinal tap, and he hated needles.
Oh, that's tough.
So hard.
Like I had 53 stitches in my leg when I was a kid.
Wow.
And my brother stood there like holding my hand, and my dad was like facing like big strong guy. Like
What'd you get 53 stitches for?
I went over a slip and slide that had a nail underneath it.
No. That is
I've never broken a bone, you guys. Like I am not an athletic person. I am not like an outdoor. I was not an outdoorsy kid, but like we were in a slip and slide in our front yard.
That is awful.
I was like, one more time. I want to go one more time. Brandon and I had
You never do one more time on anything.
Yeah. What do you say in skiing?
You never ski the last run.
No. I know, but there's a saying.
Yeah. I don't know. It's something
run,
about
skip the last.
I don't know.
Something?
It's like you just whenever you say
never
there's
say it's your last run because then
you're gonna get
jinxing
hurt
yourself.
Yeah, no.
So
and
I guess
you know
a slip and
it's funny
slide
that
too.
you bring up the jinxing thing because my dad was really superstitious.
Oh, was he?
Like literally, like a Friday the 13th was like a national holiday in our house.
Wow.
Like no flying, no driving, no
It's a
working.
good day for Jews, though. That's
Yeah.
what my mom always told me.
It's when Brody was born.
Yeah. Friday the 13th.
No, I've had like many of
Yeah.
very pleasant Friday the 13th, but it was like, oh,
Wow, you don't fly on Friday the 13th.
I mean, I've never really like had to make the
Yeah.
choice not
Yeah.
to. I don't know what I would do if it was like, hey,
You
Yeah.
must.
yeah,
You will come across this at some point.
Maybe.
I will, and I don't know what I'm gonna do because it's
Yeah.
but it was literally like he was so superstitious.
Yeah.
And he always said too, like he always thought like, oh, I'm not gonna get old. He always said that. It was like, and when he turned 50, he died when he was 55, and when he turned 50, he was like upset. Like he was like this
He was
is
like
not.
feeling the age.
Yeah, but like not even anything was different. He just was like, it's like, it's almost like he like put it out there, and this was like before he got
Yeah.
Yeah.
really, so college graduation, he was going shot for shot with like my friends at this burger place, which I was not participating in because I do not I love to, wine is great,
Yeah.
shots are not for me.
Feel that.
And so he, he's waiting, obviously, because
Yeah.
he's like a big man and I have like
Yeah.
little scrawny friends. But he's like, he sounds plastered, but it's like, I know he's not.
Wow,
Right.
what a weird experience.
Yeah, and that was like the first weird conversation where it's like the other parents' friends at the lunch were like, whoa. And I was like,
cognitively, he was fine.
Totally
but his
fine.
Speech.
What
Exactly.
did
sounded
other people
impaired.
think? Did the parents think that he was plastered, or did they think something was wrong?
I think the parents who knew, like I was trying to like explain,
Yeah.
And he had to like drive around with this little card in his wallet, like if he got pulled over, because eventually his speech was so bad. Obviously, even he wouldn't drink and drive, so like even when he was totally sober, it sounded like very much just like a drunk person.
That's really weird that he like went so far as to have a card
It had
and
a-
still no one knew.
yeah.
anything.
So they were calling it aphasia. It was like a practic speech,
Yes.
but that's like a symptom.
But why would you have all of a sudden aphasia?
Right.
Right,
So
so
like
they
late
knew-
onset aphasia.
So this was like, I would say 4 years after he initially was like, what's going on with my speech kind of thing.
Wow.
And so they knew like something was wrong. And okay, my brother and I weren't really privy to like everything because my parents were really into keeping us like,
Protected from it.
yeah, which is crazy because my mom had like a super crazy medical thing when we were in middle school. She had a 9-inch blood clot in her arm and an aneurysm in her
my
chest.
God.
Oh my God.
And she almost died. And they tried to keep us in the dark with that one. And I was
Wow.
like pissed because
Because it's like you can sense that something's wrong. It's like
For sure.
you know when things are not normal.
For sure. But I think also because there wasn't like a firm diagnosis either, and there wasn't like a course of treatment,
Yeah.
he especially didn't want, us to freak out. And like, we didn't want to freak out either,
Sure.
But so I'm trying to like even remember the progression of things. That like the first time that I ever heard him say out loud like I have a terminal illness, because they didn't really know what it was, but it was like they were doing all of these tests and it was progressing, and my mom would always joke they would go to the doctor and like they would have him do like motor skills tests.
Yeah.
It's like, move your foot around in a circle or whatever, and he was like a really perfectionist person.
Yeah.
So he could do all of them and my mom couldn't, and she was like, maybe it's me.
That
Wow.
reminds me
Yeah.
of when you would come with me to the neurology appointments and they make you
Spell world backwards.
yeah.
And Jordy's like, I'm ready.
And I'm like,
Erica's like
I said to the doctor, I'm like, this is giving me a lot of anxiety. And they also had her like remember 5 words. And he's like, I'm going to ask you in 5 minutes to remember them. And I was like, I think it's been 5 minutes. Are you going to ask her? Because I didn't want more time to pass because it was making me really anxious.
Did you remember the 5 words?
I did, but like the world, I don't know.
backwards was like a tough one.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
D-
I feel like you did it, no problem, because you're like calm.
ROW.
See, I always think it's
Yeah.
ORW when you say it. DL
DL
world. O.
ROW.
What?
World.
Yes. I always think it's an O.
There is an O.
No, first. I thought it was
You think
DL.
world starts with O.
No. Okay. Anyway, we can.
I can't spell
Tangent.
like at all. So world.
Well, they also
probably
ask
does.
you to do math. They're like,
Yeah.
if I have this many quarters and this many nickels, and I'm like, I'm not.
Okay.
a math
See,
person.
I'm like that one felt fine. It's really the
Right. I was
language.
like, I'm not a math person. This is not an indication of how well my brain works.
You're like, I would have failed
Yeah.
at this 10 years ago, failed at this yesterday, failed tomorrow. Like, I'm
Exactly.
good.
Okay, but anyway.
But
so
yeah, so I can relate to that. Like some of the things are like hard to do. Like
Right. But it's like,
as a
but and you can relate too, because it's like you're also like a very calm and diligent person, where it's like I could picture you in these appointments being like, oh, like I can
sure.
do that. And so that's, but so he was going through all these tests and they just couldn't figure it out. And like, I don't even really know the progression of things. Like, it's not even really that important ultimately, but like I remember the first time he said, I'm terminally ill. It was like the most bizarre situation. So I was living at home.
And this is after college now.
After college. This is like the summer after college.
Okay.
So I just graduated and I was sleeping, and the way our bedrooms were is like my parents' room was like right there. So I heard my dad like screaming in the middle of the night, but it was like muffled, because even like the screaming at this point was like slurred. It wasn't articulate. And it's because my mom fell out of bed, which was really bizarre. My mom's like super hot and young and healthy. And not that her being hot.
Shout out to Ryan's mom.
For being hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Truly.
And healthy.
And young. I mean, not literally, but
Yeah. And we love that.
yeah, we do. She's really hot.
Yeah.
And so she fell out of bed and she had landed like on her neck, like upside down.
Oh my God.
And I still don't know how she fell out of bed. I think they have like a high bed and she just slipped, like it could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
But he was screaming, and so I came into the room, and my brother was, I don't know where my brother was. He must have been out, like, he was in college too. And she was in like this crazy upside down position, and so we were afraid to move her.
Right.
So we called the paramedics, and the paramedics came, and they were like, "What the fuck happened? Like, how did she get into this position?" And I remember my dad being like, "I don't know. I think she's just really stressed. Like, I have a terminal illness."
Oh, wow.
That was the first time you heard
That
him
was
say
the first time I heard
What
him
was
say
going on
it.
through your mind?
Yeah.
I was like, fuck no. Like, absolutely not. I was like, why did you just say that? Because I had never, like, I knew he was sick.
But you hadn't thought about it in those
Not really.
terms.
Not really, because I mean, he still totally ran his own business. He was self-employed.
Yeah.
He took care
And
of
there was
our
no
whole family.
diagnosis.
There was no formal diagnosis. It was just like the potential that like maybe he would lose his ability to speak was pretty eminent.
Yeah.
But he was pretty good at. I mean, he still did everything, because he could type, he could write, he could, because his cognition was perfect. And his cognition was perfect until the end, which is like maybe the most fucked up part of the whole
Yeah,
thing.
that is really fucked up.
Like, he was like trapped.
Yes.
But I remember that, and I remember being like, that was a crazy. And I think I like slept in my parents' bed that night. I was like
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
But I was
I
like,
totally get that.
right? Like, I remember you told me when I moved out of my parents' house when we were working together at Go Guardian.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, I'm like stressed. And you were like, don't worry, my favorite place in the world is still like sitting at home on my parents' couch. I still feel like the safest there.
I do. Yeah.
And I
It's
think
the
about
truth.
that all the time.
Right?
And like you still do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to live there anymore.
Right. You don't necessarily
No.
want to live there, but like when I think about a safe place, like for sure that's
Yeah,
Yeah.
you go back there.
parents' bed, parents' couch, just
Yeah.
like a cozy, safe place.
Yeah. For sure don't want to live there, but like it's
Yeah.
cozy to, yeah.
Yeah.
I think about you saying that all the time.
Yeah. I still feel that way. Like when I'm like nervous or sad or scared or whatever, I'm like, oh, like where do I want to be?
And getting to like know your mom on the Mother's Day episode,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was
she's like the sweetest.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking of that the whole time, and I was
Yeah.
just like, man,
I'd want to be on her couch too.
like
know.
literally. I was
Yeah,
like, I want to
I
hang out with
know.
these people. What are they up to?
Yeah.
The best, honestly, the best.
Like truly. And so after that, like I mean, it just like slowly got worse, and so the next symptoms to happen were, like his mobility was always fine, but it was like a little shaky, a little weird. But because it was impacting his speech, then it impacted his ability to swallow, which ultimately ended up in him not being able to eat.
Wow.
And he was drooling, he was also like immaculate. Like he used to blow dry his underarm hair.
What?
Whoa.
I've never heard of this before.
Like before you put on your deodorant, like you get out of the shower and you're wet and you're like a guy, so you have a lot of underarm hair. He didn't want it to be like he wanted it to be like fluffy.
He wanted it to look nice.
Yeah, and like yeah.
Like he cared a lot about the way he was
And
presenting.
he didn't like fashion. Like he wore like jeans and a polo shirt every day, but he had a polo shirt in like every single color.
Yeah.
I joke that now that's how I am with overalls, and like I have overalls in every color. Like this
and
is what I
literally
wear
you're wearing
forever.
overalls
get
right
it.
now.
Truly, I have them.
Yeah.
I have 3 pairs of overalls,
Yeah.
which is probably more overalls than like anybody
No, I
else.
think it's the perfect amount.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But so, so that was really hard, like the drooling and stuff, because it was like it was gross.
So how did he
Yeah.
communicate?
Yeah, was he writing or typing?
He was writing and typing, but then he lost a lot of dexterity in his fingers. And so then it became like pointing, and he had like thumbs up, thumbs down, and fuck you. Those were the
Oh my
choices.
God, I love that. His sense of humor remains.
Yeah.
The whole time. And you would always ask him like, how are you? And he would say thumbs up, even though it
Yeah.
was like, what do you...
You're obviously not doing great.
I had this like little thing from the 90s that he gave me at some point. It was called the last word, and it was like a little box, and you would press the button and it would just shuffle through profanities.
Oh.
So you'd press it and it'd be like, you're an asshole, fuck you, fucking jerk, eat shit. And I found it when we were at dinner one night, having dinner at the table, and we were talking about like the thumbs up, thumbs down, and I was like, wait, I can solve your speech problems right now.
I have the last word.
And I went into my bedside
Oh my
table drawer and I
gosh.
brought it down, and I was like,
Was he so happy?
He was like, this covers 95%
Yeah.
of the things that I need to say.
That's so funny. Do you remember like how Lee was introduced to you?
It's a really good question. I don't 100% remember how he was introduced.
We need
but
your mom here.
I know. I know these, and I was with her last night, and I was asking her questions, and like, that would have been a great question to ask her. But, I think it was relatively slowly, and he, he just fit kind of right in with my brother and myself, and Lee has a daughter, who lives in Northern California, and she's older, but, we all just kind of meshed, and I think we started going, like, I just remember going to these Korean, like, looking forward to going to groups so I could go to Gayukaku,
That's really
like,
sweet.
after. And then I really started looking forward to seeing him and seeing them, and I think it was just like a natural kind of progression. But I definitely, there was never a moment where I was like,
I wonder if that's like rare or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's you're also, that your parent is with someone who like truly understands. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't have to, you don't have to worry about.
It's not like a parent trap situation.
Right.
Where it's like, you hate the person, they're like,
Yeah. Right. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. So
Where
I think
they met over this like shared experience, like this tragic shared experience, but like you knew that he understood.
exactly. And he took me to Korean barbecue, and he worked at a bakery. So
wow.
it's
So like, he had some
owned
brownie
one of
points,
the
literally.
cookies by design, like those big like shortbread cookies that did like so he owned the bakery that was on 3rd Street across from Cedars.
Wow.
And so it was like, I go to Korean barbecue, and then he let me like mess around in a bakery and just like frost.
It's like a dream.
Oh my God. And I was like, 10-year-old me was thriving.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, so you had this like really early experience of grief and loss in your world. I guess I'm wondering like if there were any ripple effects of that, like how that impacted your other relationships or any like fears or anxieties around death or around health or anything like that, given that it was so sudden.
So I cannot let any kind of like rift or any kind of uncomfortable conversation with anyone, I can't let it stand. So like I would say is my number one.
It's like
That's like my number one thing. And I think Michael would attest to this, where if there's any type of conflict, I need it resolved immediately. It's like
I can imagine that's pretty hard because sometimes conflicts can't get resolved right away.
Of course.
Do you like give in then? Of like, okay, it's fine. Like I'll just.
No, I would say that I don't give in internally. I think I will sit on it and I will think about it kind of constantly. And it's similar where I don't like not like hearing back from people. It makes me really nervous. And I think it's, for me, it's just kind of like, you never know. And I think that is one of the biggest parts of my personality and parts of my life that come from losing,
Someone
you know,
so
my
sudden.
dad in such a
Yeah.
sudden manner. Is like those would probably be the two most extreme kind of things that as you know, as a person that I deal with, is I have an incredibly hard time with, even it can be something so minor, or it's, you know, if if I know someone's like going somewhere, or if like when Michael and I first started dating, it would take like everything in me. If I like knew he was coming from work to my apartment and I like know how much time it takes for him to get there, and he wasn't there, it would take everything in me from being like, okay, like, where are you? So I would, you know,
What would you do?
I would call him and be like, oh, I'm ordering takeout. What do you want?
Oh, wow.
And
You like find reasons.
right. Yeah. I'm like,
Never.
oh, I'm just going to have it be here when you get here. But he's so incredibly like understanding about
You have
that.
like
He's
such
so
a great
supportive.
awareness. Like, you know exactly where these things came from.
Yeah. And so I would say probably that, you know, that is a little kind of less detrimental. I would say being able to let things kind of lie, or giving people space. I have a very, very hard time with that.
Like, what does
very
that look
hard time.
like?
It looks like if there's a little conflict, or if there's a little like anything and someone just kind of needs space,
What do you do?
I will be like, I need to get this. Like, I need to get this resolved. Like, I need to find a way to fix it. I need to find a way to fix it. I need to, you know, and it needs to be done as soon as humanly possible.
Wow.
And of course, there are times where you can't, it can't be done.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like sit with that. And so,
Yeah, I imagine that's hard at times.
yeah, it is. And it's something that I'm working through. But it's something that how I've always kind of, you know, I've always been. And I think that it's a fear of, well, like, you could walk out the door, or we could get off the phone, or I could send you one and I never hear from you.
Like,
again.
you want like, and if there is a last encounter, like, you want it to be positive.
Right. Yeah. So that's where it kind of stems from, is like, I would never want, you know, like, I couldn't tell you what the last thing I said to my dad was, because he like went to go take out the trash.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
That's so much pressure on
Yeah.
you to feel like every because like something so trivial as taking out the trash, like, I can imagine you're like, it needs to be positive, like a lot of the time.
yeah.
I was thinking like you were saying it could be something minor. I'm thinking about the major things. Like, let's say you get into like a real conflict, you know, like I imagine with an ex-boyfriend or a friend that you're no longer friends with, and maybe like there's a reason why this person shouldn't be in your life anymore. Is that the same kind of thing? Like, you maybe hold on longer, or you sort of keep that person around
Oh, yeah,
because
you're like
you
very
don't
quickly,
want
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. I would say that there are certainly exes or people that should have left my life far before the time that they did. And then when they did, the like battle between just my mind and like my sense of, you know, being rational versus my emotional reaction to things. I did everything humanly possible to hang on to those people. Yeah. To the point where I was just talking myself in circles. I was going this, and it took, honestly, making this person pretty much dead to me by like getting rid of everything.
Yeah.
Like, as silly as it is, like, it was like an out of sight, out of mind type thing, where I needed to basically have like even acquaintance that we may have had just scrubbed from like the phone or social media or from just my life in general. And that was when I started that and therapy. But I would say that was one of the turning points, I think, for me, in really being able to let a certain person go, was being just very out of sight of mind, because I knew if I had tried to like, you know, keep, you know, kind of like not talk to that person anymore. And I couldn't do it. I had to cut everything out to such an extreme level that there was not a single thing that would remind me of that person. And that was one of the biggest things I did to move on from that. And so that was like, that's like a major conflict to your point, George. So like, I don't really have an in between, right? It's either like you're fully gone, or it needs to be fixed immediately. And that kind of comes with sometimes not letting people have the space they need to like.
That's so helpful, like as a friend, to like know that. I'm like, I mean, I don't think we've like ever gotten in conflict, but I'm like, oh, if we did, like it would make so much sense to me if you said something or did something. Like I wonder, do your other friends know that too?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of my really close group that would know, but for the most part, the majority of my friends probably wouldn't know unless we've been in a situation where I've just been like people always joke, like, I want a double text or triple text, like I'll octuple text without even batting an eye. Like, and I won't even think about it. Like,
no, I'm like rethinking, like, have I ever like, because I'm like,
I know, I'm like, I'm such a terrible texter.
I know. Recently, the past 6 months, I'm like, oh, I wonder if I've ever, I don't know, have I ever like made you anxious?
I don't, probably.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough. But it happened so often that like,
oh my god! It's like every time you tell, you're like, I'm just not even gonna try and text Erica because I feel anxious every time.
No, oh my gosh, no. I mean, it's like, it's.
But it's so helpful to know this now.
No,
and I'm like, if I see text from you,
but also like you don't have to
know.
respond to me like right now. Like, I promise it's fine.
But maybe I'll text a little bit more quickly than I normally would.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just like show up at your door.
Yeah, you know I live.
But no, I think that.
So like, do you like check flight times? Like, yeah, that's a yes.
I had Flight Tracker up yesterday. Michael was on his way to Costa Rica.
Wow.
I watched his whole route.
Yeah.
Jordy has a little bit of that too, but Jordy, yours was more like death anxiety around like separating, like from your parents specifically.
Are you talking about when I was like little?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was like scared that if I went on sleepover, someone would like come into my parents' house and murder them. And, like I don't know what I was going to do to stop them, but I was scared if I wasn't there.
I remember when I went to Australia, even, I mean, I'm not your parent, but like you also were like very concerned.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just like, you didn't text me, and I like did the math, and I'm like, hey, you landed, like, where you at? You know?
Don't have a working, back then, you didn't like have working phones. You literally had to like get an Australian phone.
Right. It was like different times. But it's funny, Erica, you, I think, have that, but because of Find My iPhone, you just like add everyone on there, and then you don't have to have that because you know where they are at all times.
Yeah, that's true. I do have a lot of people in Find My iPhone. And it was funny because like 2 weeks ago, I don't know, I look on there for someone, but then I like end up seeing where everyone is. And I'm like, oh, my mom and my mother-in-law are at the same mall, but they don't know it. So I screenshotted it to them. I'm like, look, you guys are right next to each other. But I promise I wasn't stalking you. Yeah. And they're like, of course you were stalking us. How else would you have known that we're both at the mall?
That's so funny.
But yeah, it was hard for my mom too, because my dad always kind of like spoke for the family, and then he couldn't.
Yes.
And he couldn't communicate as well. And so we, like, the immediate family had to kind of like, not guess what he was going to say, but like extrapolate based on like context clues and cues kind of thing. But at the end, it was like he could barely even do like thumbs up, thumbs down. So he ended up with a feeding tube, and the way he died was he fell down the stairs.
Oh my God.
My parents were living in New York because after I graduated from college, they moved into like the little apartment that I lived in Bronxville, which is like a really beautiful, idyllic, like cute little town in like the suburbs. And they got to walk everywhere, and they just really liked it.
Yeah.
And so he fell down the stairs, and I remember I was with my best friends at my parents' house in LA because I was living here. My brother was in college at NYU, and my parents lived in New York. Kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, you're like house swapping.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. And my two best friends were over, and we were just like having like a little pool day. And my dad's best friend called me because he was out there visiting, and he's like my godfather. He's one of 6 guests at our wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. Literally. And he was like, hey, don't freak out. Your dad fell and I think you should come. And he never
Would
I was
say to
always
come.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm coming out. And they were always like, let's not. But he
Yeah.
was like, I think you should come. So my 2 best friends, Hannah and Zoe, like helped me pack. They drove me to the airport.
What was that like for you? Like in
Well,
the
it was the second time that I had done like a red eye.
Okay.
Because the first time was when he got his feeding tube.
Mm.
Okay.
And
So like you're traveling from LA to New York.
and
to
showing up at
see-
the hospital like in the middle of the night or like 5 in the
Yeah.
morning, being like, and I remember I still have it. I saved all my text messages. So like the last text I sent to my dad was like I love you. I'm on my way. And he didn't respond.
Yeah.
Because like that was our last like form of communication was texting.
right?
And it was mostly just a lot of emojis, like the sunglass smiley face emoji.
So he was texting you up until that point.
Yeah, but it was like very like he lost a lot of dexterity in his fingers. So it was like the communication was super limited.
Mm.
Yeah. So then I showed up and he had fallen down the stairs and like cracked his head open and he was in the hospital. And because I was like on the plane and before I got there, he had told his best friend, he just went like this. He was like, I'm done. He
Oh.
was like, I'm out.
Oh my
Because like,
gosh.
he could have probably recovered from the physical
Sure.
like fall. They could have probably recovered him, but it was like he was almost at the point where he had to be in diapers and had to be,
Yeah.
like we had to shave for him, which was really funny because I was like trying to help him shave and he was like pissed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Oh,
the
that's
way
so
you
terrible.
described him, he sounds like this like really independent, like fiercely independent, like robust, like once he's in the room kind of person, and then
he
to
used
go.
to always say it was way before he got sick. Like if anything ever happens to me and I can't do for myself, like take me out back and shoot me.
Yeah.
Which is what I heard Amber say.
Yes.
That her dad said.
My dad
Mhm.
says the same thing.
My mom says the same thing.
Yeah,
Like,
they're
take
like-
me off of life support.
Yeah, they're like, if I come like that, I'm done.
But then when you're actually in the
Thanks.
position of it, of like seeing that happen to your parent, it's like such a different circumstance.
Yeah, and it's also like I think you don't know as an individual like how you'll respond in that moment.
Right.
Like would he actually? Because it's like he wanted to live for a while because he wanted to see my brother graduate from college
Oh.
Yeah.
really bad. My mom bought him like an outfit, and my mom did everything. And my mom's like a very petite woman. She's like me, but like thinner and like 63.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but she was helping him with everything. And
Yeah.
it's like it was at the point where
Like she couldn't physically take care of him.
she couldn't.
Yeah.
And so, and he didn't want a caregiver. And at the time, I worked at a caregiving company.
Wow. You're like, I can send you people.
It was like a tech company. But that was the thing. I was like, I wouldn't trust any of these people with my
Right.
dad. So I was like, I think this is like kind of a bad scene.
Yeah.
And he didn't want it. And so I was like, I think I'm going to quit I was like 24 and my
Yeah.
job didn't really matter. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job and like, I'll take care of dad. And
Yeah.
he was like,
Oh.
no. And that was like a firm no for him. And
Yeah.
this happened like, right. So it's like, it's weird because it was almost like a blessing that he fell down the stairs. Because otherwise it's like, I don't know. I'm like, would he still be alive?
Right.
Would
It
the
could have been
vegetative
this like
state?
very long, drawn
Yeah.
out process
I know,
of just
'cause-
slowly
Right.
losing all of your abilities.
Because he already was on a feeding tube. He like the things he enjoyed, talking, eating,
Right, it's like, what is
drinking,
life?
like socializing,
Yeah.
being the chief entertainment officer. Like he couldn't do any of those things anymore.
It's just like all of this identity loss, but
Just,
then
like,
he had,
existing.
but then like had the cognitive.
That's
capacity.
the most fucked up part. Is
Yeah.
it's like, and then people would start to be like, "Hi, Bob, how are?" And I was like, "Dude, he can fucking hear you. Like,
Yeah.
he's like,
Right.
But I understand where people were coming from.
Right.
'Cause
They
it's
didn't
like,
know.
Yeah, because it's like he was like totally out of it. Like he couldn't speak and he's drooling.
Yeah.
So of course you're gonna you're gonna think that there's a cognition issue.
Yeah.
But
That's
there
so
was so
scary to
scary
like
to
know
watch.
that you're just like, there's this like degenerative disease happening to your body that you can't control, and then have that awareness. It's like really like such a helpless, out of control feeling.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And so it's like when I think about it now, and even honestly, like pretty much right after it happened, like my mom, my brother, like all of us were like, this was like I think my first emotion when he like first died was like relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Because you knew he like probably wasn't like loving this new version of
no,
life.
and it was also like how, and the doctors were like, listen, once they kind of figured out that, because eventually he did have enough scans that they were like, there is degeneration here. Here's what we think it is. we can't properly diagnose it, and there's no cure. So we don't really 100% sure, like, know what this is. They were like, it's pre-subnuclear palsy or corticobasal degeneration. We're both kind of like, and I'm not a doctor.
If they like found this earlier, would they have been able to intervene at all?
No.
Okay.
So like when he was saying like, I hear slurred speech, if
It
something was
was already-
diagnosed, like nothing would have been able to, nothing would
And
have
that's
changed.
like in the way that it's very similar to ALS.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there
It's
aren't
just
really drugs that like can either reverse or stop the progression.
Not really. And there's like not a lot of research that's done with it because it's just like, it's like a weird.
Well, I think it's similar to like brain cancer and brain tumors in the sense that like because they're really hard to treat or they don't know how to treat them, there isn't like a lot of funding or like willingness to put money into researching them.
Because they're all different, so it's not like they're going to be able to like at scale.
Right, like
sell-
generalize.
You can't
yeah.
like generalize it. Like it's like so specific. So I know it like it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I mean, I think like so my brother and I were in the car, like when he was in the hospital at like the very end, and we were like sitting in the car, just the two of us, and we were on the phone with his general practitioner, who was this amazing doctor who I will not name, from UCLA, who had been his doctor before he got sick and helped, he was alongside his neurologists and everybody through the whole way. And because at this point, like he was functional, the doctors were like, the only way he's going to die is he's going to choke or he's going to fall. Like, those are the choices. Like this brain disease isn't going to kill him. It's not going to shut his organs down.
Right.
It's just going to shut down everything around.
else.
Wow. It's not wild.
Totally wild. So it's like, hypothetically, if we kept him in like a bubble, he'd still be alive, just like laying, like,
Right.
feeding.
But he like
just a
wouldn't
vegetable.
be the version of
Oh, he'd just
himself.
be a full-on vegetable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then the question of like, what is
Quality.
life?
Right. And so we were on the phone with his doctor, and we were like, what do we do? And his doctor was like, I promised him that I would help him. So
Were you thinking like physician assisted death?
Yeah, he was like, which would have been illegal.
You would
because-
have to have gone to a different state or something.
Not even because we would have had, because it's like you have to know that you're going to be terminal within 6 months, and they have to also be able to verbally say
Right.
they have to consent, and he couldn't consent to anything.
Oh.
And so he was like, I will help you. And we were like, we don't, okay. Like, we were like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
But he ended up being in a really great palliative care center in New York, and he died in New York, which I'm really grateful for because they're like weirdly more lenient there in terms of like palliative care. There's no like, we were like no end of
No DNRs.
Yeah.
nothing, and we were like, just give him as much morphine as you can. And on his last day, me, my brother, and my mom were all there, and we all got like time to talk to him, like, and we like didn't know if he could hear us,
Right.
and so we all got our time to talk to him. And I remember telling him, like, because I'd been with the same boyfriend forever, and we'd like just broken up a couple months before, and he liked him, but he always thought he was like kind of a pussy. Sorry if you're listening. And I remember being like, telling him just like talking to him and telling him like that we were going to be fine, and that like I was a bad bitch because he made me one, kind of thing,
And you are.
like
No, you
it's kind of like, thank you, but like there's levels, and I remember being like, don't worry, like so and so and I broke up, like we're not getting married, and then he died, and I was like, see, he's good.
Yeah.
He's
He just
fine.
needed to hear that.
He just needed to hear that. He's fine. And I had like just met also the Dakota who became my husband.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Dakota never met my dad.
What is
we
that?
I was gonna ask about that. What that feels like to.
He saw him through like a door because he came to pick me up for a date because I was living at home.
Yeah.
And my dad was like downstairs, and he saw him, but my dad didn't want to meet any new people because he was like so
Yeah.
unlike himself. And I'm really grateful that like he didn't meet him
He like
because-
knows your dad through you.
Through your
100%.
lens.
Like exactly.
Yeah.
And like I talk about him ad nauseum. Like
Yeah.
you can tell I've probably talked 95% of the time because I love like talk, even though it's like bad shit, like I love like talking about him.
I feel like I have a few questions for you, but I agree with Erica in that like it's so helpful to know like what are the things that like kind of trigger anxiety for your friends, because then you better understand like their reactions to things, and you understand like what they need from you. And so I guess my encouragement would just be like to share with
Oh, wow,
us.
Jordy. That feels like something I said to you earlier.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I would say just like to share because yeah, the more that people understand you and your needs and the way your brain works, like the better friends they can be and like the better they can show up and support you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really no. That I mean, that's super helpful. It's like this weird kind
It's
of
like, how do you even
circle.
start that, right?
Yeah, it's like this weird kind of circle in my brain where it's like, okay, you know, if I bring up why I sometimes act the way I do, I then have to make that person uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
But is it going to make them uncomfortable or do you just think it's going to make them uncomfortable?
oh, this is 100% me thinking.
Yeah.
I don't actually like the rational part of me is like, no, you know, no one is going to be uncomfortable by bringing up something like that. But
That's the part of you that says,
yeah, right. So the part, you know, it's like a little like devil and angel.
Yeah.
And so I always just opt to let my full crazy flag fly.
Okay, well, I would like to tell you, I'm happy to know now. There's no
I'm
discomfort on my end.
glad. I know. I'm.
And maybe all of your friends will now, you know, all of our friends will listen to this and now
Text
they'll
me
know.
back, guys.
Yeah. Text Nicole back.
Nicole will be stalking you. She'll be tracking your flight.
I'll find you.
She will come after you.
Oh, it's so funny. That's so funny.
Okay, so after going back in time, so you did Our House, which is like the quintessential grief
Yes.
like place. I think anyone who has gone through death, loss, grief, they like end up at Our House.
Mhm.
And you did your own group.
Yep.
And then what role did you take after? Like, how did you go on the other side?
Yeah. So I was in my own group. And then when I was in high school, I became, Our House has groups by age group. You can be, you know, an adult, a young adult, teenager, young, and then really little. And I went back in high school as a volunteer. Each group has 2 group leaders. And those are, I would say, like the adults of the groups where they've gone through training and they're like official Our House employees. I was a volunteer group leader. So I was placed in a group with 2 incredible group leaders and the littles. So I had like 3 to 6.
Oh my
like
God.
The sweetest little nuggets you ever could see. And seeing kind of grief through littles' eyes is really, you know, it was a kind of a glimpse into probably what my brother experienced when he was in his own group, because he was in that age range a little bit. But, you know, you come into group and you go every group, you sit down, you go around and you say your name, and then you say who died and how they died.
Oh.
And so you start every single group just like that. And the littles, I mean, some of them just had kind of no idea. Some of them were very in tune with how their person died. And from there, you know, you pretty much color. And I've seen the Rugrats episode where Chucky's parent dies about 6,100 times.
Oh my God.
We watched that a lot.
Wow.
But we would do activities and we would do a lot of coloring and we would do a lot of things with, you know, like magazines. And there were times where, you know, some of we always called them the littles, but they would kind of like try to crawl on you and climb on you. And they're just kind of processing this in such like an intense way. And all you want to do is kind of like squeeze them, but you just like let them, you know, you just kind of, you don't react. But, I did that throughout high school, and it was an incredibly rewarding experience. I think that I learned, you know, you kind of go into it, and I knew I wanted to volunteer and I kind of wanted to pay it forward. I also wanted it to look good on my college applications, but I think that I learned so much from being a volunteer there. And I think that it shaped how I communicate. It shaped how I respond to friends or people that are going through a difficult time, in a different way than when I was in group. Like, I think when you're the person in group, you're learning the tools of how to process grief and how to process, and you're doing these activities, you're doing these things to help yourself feel better. And then you're kind of on the other side of it and you're working with littles that really don't understand for the most part, so you kind of take on this role of not only am I trying to teach you how to handle your grief, I'm trying to teach you how to understand what happened, because you have some parents that are just like, I could tell, my child so many times that, their parents are coming back or their brother or whoever, and it doesn't register. And so you're teach in a gentle way and in like a weirdly fun way.
Right.
Right. Like
that's so wild.
It helped, prepare me a little bit for the real world when it's kind of like, I feel like if I could teach these like teeny humans how to understand what's going on in their life, like I can help any friend through anything, which like isn't necessarily true.
But there's some truth to it.
No, but I think you are really good at like showing up for your friends, like even if it's just like a text or like a quick emoji, or I don't know, like you're a very thoughtful friend. I feel like anytime you go somewhere, you like bring back like a little present for our kids, or like it's just, I don't know, that like extra piece of knowing that like your friends are on your mind, or like the people that you love are on your mind, makes them feel really loved by you.
Yeah,
so
it's
nice.
true.
It also helps that I love your children so much.
I know. And like while you're talking, I'm like, I hope Brody never has to join this fucking group.
I know. I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah, I know. Well, and it's crazy. My mom also worked at our house as like a volunteer supervisor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so my mom worked there for like 2 years, I think. And she worked with like adults who had lost their like parents, because my mom lost her mom when she was 20 years old. And so that was like something that she wanted to do. Same sort of thing as you, like to understand being on the other side.
Yeah.
It's very healing to like show up for people.
Yeah. But yeah. Hoping my kiddo doesn't have to go through that either.
But when he died, it was really crazy because he and my mom were like so connected. They were super different people, but like they would have been married for almost 30 years, 31 years, I think, next year. And we all got to talk to him, and we were like, we're really hungry. We're going to Jews, right? We're going to order Chinese food.
Yeah, of course.
So we ordered some Chinese food, and we went to like the little like, family waiting room or whatever, and we ate it. And my mom said that she said to herself, this would be a good time to go.
Oh, wow.
And the nurse came in and was like, he's gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the chills.
It's weird.
Yeah.
And so it's
really
like, and
crazy.
it was like, and at the first, like, and we had this really awesome, this sounds crazy, but we had this awesome funeral for him. It was so fun. There were martinis. There was a hot dog cart. There was See's chocolate.
I mean, that's the only way to do it, right?
It was like a huge party.
I like how you brought the West Coast Seas candy into the mix.
Well, he came, we had the funeral here.
Okay.
He's born and raised in Los
Got
Angeles.
it.
So our whole family was here. Like Seas candy was like
Made its appearance.
Yeah.
literally had to. People who sang Godiva,
Oh, no.
like I
I
saw
mean,
him among my people.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
I
it's
mean,
not even.
I love my Scotch Kiss. The Bordeaux.
Yeah, absolutely. Milk Bordeaux.
Milk Bordeaux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the
So
best.
good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
We're all on the same page here.
Yeah, no, it's really
No,
important.
but I like love that. Hank and I have like had to create a lot of like
Plans.
future planning things, and in our like will, we basically have our like funeral instructions, and it says like we want to be cremated, and then we want you guys to like have a party,
Yeah.
and like we want all the dogs to be there.
Yes.
And we want like lots of good music and like really good food, and like we just want people to like have fun and like enjoy the day. And I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think back so fondly on it. Like, the only, like, weird part about it is being like, oh, I had the best time at my dad's funeral.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Right.
a weird one. But, like,
Yeah, it is like an interesting thing to think about, but I feel like there's like gratitude
oh,
even
for sure.
for in like a situation that's so incredibly terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's crazy because I think, like, the grieving now is, like, so much, not, like, more present, but it's, like, it feels weirder than it did like right when it first happened, because when it first happened there was like so much relief, and now there's like more of the grief part of
The
it,
absence.
Like the loss.
Yeah.
especially like, you know, for my mom, it's like my mom was like still young and hot and famously and healthy, and
I need to
like,
see a picture of your
I know,
mom.
like we
have you ever
definitely.
met my mom?
I think I did meet your
He
mom.
went to my house.
Yeah, I brought the dogs to your house.
So Jordy is like, you know, Frankie, giant German
Yes.
Shepherd, is so gentle with my little Stanley.
Which is
Aw.
funny because she's kind of mean
I
sometimes.
mean, she's like murdered two,
animals in the last like
not
couple
dogs.
months. Yeah,
Like squirrels, chipmunks,
Gopher.
gophers, yeah, and
But like Stanley
possum.
wants to hunt a gopher badly, so I think he probably was like, "This is my
Maybe
girl."
they
get
felt
her.
like a spiritual
Yeah.
Like,
connection.
together we
Can
have-
take this on.
I think so. Like, I think
Just go to
I
her
love it.
backyard. There's a lot of gophers to
Yeah.
be
Well,
had.
Libet Park. So Jordy and I during the pandemic would like meet up at Libet Park.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember when I saw her pregnant with Brody, ran into her there, and she was
Oh,
like
yeah.
about to deliver.
literally
Brody.
about to have Brody.
And I was like, dude, you look so
I know. Great.
good. And she was like, I feel pretty bad.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I don't care because you look
Yeah, I
awesome.
know. She
You know
did.
what? We can always count on Ryan for calling out someone to look good.
Yeah, I mean,
Me, your mom.
people look good, and then you need to look good. Like, I just feel like it's important. So, but my mom, you know, it's like just very recently, and I know she's going to listen to this too. So,
Yeah.
just very recently, she's like, I mean, very recently, she's kind of expressed an interest in, she calls it having a part-time boyfriend.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is so hard to even come to that and say it out loud.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think I've been pretty like selfish about it because I'm like, I haven't even really thought about like how hard it is for her to come to that.
Yeah.
And I've mostly just been like,
On your
like,
end.
I want to be happy for you, and like I'm just not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
because it feels like a replacement.
Yeah.
Not even a replacement. I'm just like, so my dad was so protective of me growing up. Like every boyfriend I had, it was just like, I'm gonna kill them. I'm
Yeah.
gonna polish my guns that I don't, whatever. And I was like really offended by it because I was like, don't you trust me to like pick a person, whatever.
Yeah.
And I had like a real heart to heart with him about it. And eventually he kind of chilled out. But now I'm like, oh, every day I will be there. You
Yeah.
know? And now
You're
I'm like,
feeling that
joke's on me,
protective.
Right.
because
Yeah.
that flipped in a weird way.
Really
now
weird
I'm
way.
The dad
Yeah.
to my, I don't know. Like,
That's
what?
a really.
Well, I was thinking about that as you were sharing the story. I was like seeing your parent like become a less like able-bodied version of themselves. I
Yeah.
feel like in some ways like you become more of like the caretaker or the parent in that way, and I feel like that's such an interesting dynamic shift.
Like it changed our family dynamic like pretty severely.
I'm
Because my dad was
sure.
like very like Tony Soprano, like head of household
Mm.
kind of
Yes.
gig. And so after he died, it's like like now I feel like my mom, my brother, and I are all on like an equal.
You're like on the same
Yeah.
level
We're
kind
all
of
just-
thing.
Which like happen, they talk about like the sandwich generation of like taking care of younger ones and parents, but for you like happening in such formative years,
Mm-hmm.
like
I had just
becoming
turned
an adult.
25 when he died, and my brother had just because we're like 5 days apart. Me and my brother. Well, like we're not Irish.
a few years.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever I say that, people are like, "So was he somebody's stuck?"
Yeah.
I'm like, no. But yeah, so I was 25 and just turned, and he had just turned 22.
Yeah, it's a hard time to like
You're
because
like just coming out.
you're
of
like
college.
figuring out who you are and like I remember like relying so much on my parents' like guidance and support of trying to figure out like who am I and
And I asked my dad for like not like just like I trusted his opinion so much
Yeah.
because he had really strong opinions. And it was the kind of thing where it was like he always like had a guy for something, to the point where like when I was in college, I was like, I need a plumber. And he was like, find a plumber. And I was like, don't you like
You're like, you have a guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, don't you have a guy? Like, don't you have like the best plumber? now?
Yes.
And he was like, no.
oh I feel that way about my dad too. I'm
Right,
like
sure.
who cleans your windows? Who cleans your carpets? I have a guy.
Right, because it's
Yeah.
like it's like that guy is like the guy who made it through like the ringer of
Right.
whatever, like the gauntlet of
Yes.
whatever. And so like, but as I'm like still kind of processing the grief now, it's kind of interesting because in some ways it's like I really miss having that, but then in some ways I have really like I'm glad I don't have it
Yeah.
because I have so much more confidence
And like in
being
you.
In yourself.
so much, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't second guess my decisions
Mm.
nearly as much as I used to, because it's like, and that's like the weird part about grief too, is like there's stuff in my life that is way easier because my dad's dead.
Yeah. So, like, how's that to say out loud?
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like
great.
I feel like you've
great.
probably have said it before.
I've said it like in my head a lot, and I think I
Yeah.
probably said it to my brother, and I probably said it to Dakota.
Yeah.
But I mean, even just like, you know, the decision to get married, the decision to move in together, like he moved into my mom's house with me.
I remember this.
Yeah, before
Yeah.
we moved out together. That would have never fucking happened if my dad was alive.
Yeah.
He had like his privacy, and also like
A
would have
boy
been, like,
living
what
in your
the fuck
room.
are you talking
Right.
about? Yeah. So it's like none of that would have ever happened. And
Yeah.
now it's like, I don't know. It's like my brother is also extremely independent.
Mhm.
He's a 5th grade teacher. He's about to not be because this is his last week, and he's like, see you
Yeah.
later. But it's like he like asks me some of the things that I used to ask my dad, and I'm like really excited about it, but I'm also conscious that I don't want to have that same impact
Right.
that my dad had on me, where it felt like it was like, oh, if he didn't think it was a good idea, then it just definitively wasn't a good idea.
Yes.
Luckily, my brother's like way more independent than I like, so he doesn't have
Yeah.
that same like complex that I
Yeah.
have.
Well, grief is just so funky, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
it's like such an uncomfortable thing. Like, it's just like impacts everything. So I think that piece of like having relief and then feeling loss and then feeling grateful, like
Yeah.
grief is just such an uncomfy mixed emotion, but
Yeah.
it makes sense.
And it like just changes all the time. My grandma on my dad's side, who I was really close with too. So by both my grandparents, who my brother and I were super close with, it was like one year our pop died, the next year our grandma died, the next year our dad died.
Wow.
So our whole family just like died. And we were a really small family.
That's really
On that
intense.
side. And
Yeah.
so when my brother graduated from college, he was like, we don't have it. Like, they all are gone. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? And we were all really close. But my grandma used to always say, whatever you're feeling is fine. And I
Oh,
think-
I love grandma.
She was the best. Grandma Lenny, shout out. Also hot.
Wow.
We need pictures of grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not my mom. My mom's mom. Kind of a bitch. But my grandma Lenny.
We can cut that.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Everyone knows it.
Okay.
I'm pretty public about it. It's part of my personality. But my grandma Lynn used to say, whatever you're feeling is fine. And it's like, I think about that a lot in the grieving process. It's like
Yeah.
some days I'm like sad, and some days I don't think about it at all. And then I feel bad about
Yeah.
it. It's not like I
Yes.
didn't think about
Like the dad guilt is terrible. It's like
Yeah.
you already lost your dad. You really now need to like feel guilt about the way that you grieve
are
your dad.
grieving it.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, it does feel weird out loud to be, but it also feels good to say out loud like some things are easier, because I feel like that's honest, and I feel
It's
like,
real.
I feel like a lot of people probably relate to that and don't know how to articulate it.
Yeah.
So it's like if somebody's listening to this and hears that and like can feel a little bit less
Yeah.
weird about
Right.
having that feeling, because it's like that for me lives in the exact same place that lives like my dad was my favorite person, and
Yeah.
like will always be my favorite person. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I feel that way. So for me and like my daughter Shayla, like the most traumatic part was like diagnosis to losing her. And then once I made the decision, there was some relief, because I'm like, there's no more decisions to be made.
yeah.
And like in some way that was really freeing. And then it opened up for all of these other emotions.
Mhm.
But like relief was part of that. And I don't know why it feels so taboo
I know.
to like say that, but it's true. It's part of it.
We were talking to someone this morning. We filmed a podcast like before you got here with somebody, and
You're just like,
Yeah.
it was a virtual one. But we were talking about like that idea of like a positive emotion
yeah.
and like
Yeah.
grief like existing on the like at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, and how that sometimes like feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that is typically like it's not like all or nothing. It's
Totally.
like it's very much gray. And
Yeah.
I feel like that is like a hard space to live in, you know?
Well, and I also feel like that's why like this podcast is so important, and why people don't talk about grief that much, or like get really into it. Like we talk about it like, oh, I'm sad, like I'm having a hard time, but like don't really
Well, no,
talk
yeah.
about
People
it.
are like, oh, you're sad. So what's the weather like today?
Yeah.
Or they want to like make it better.
Make it better,
It's like,
yeah.
But I might be happy in like 2 seconds, and I might be great. You know, it's like it's awkward.
Yeah, people
It's,
just need to like
super
lean
weird.
into the sad.
It's like just
Yeah.
ride the wave with the person, you know?
Yeah.
And like that can be a hard thing to do, you know?
Well, it's hard also, like, if the person doesn't, like, I don't always want to ride the wave. I'm sure, Jordy, you don't always want to ride the wave.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, there's a lot of grief comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a lot of grief comparison. Like, before coming here, I'm like, okay, my dad died 6 years ago. I have a husband and, like, a great dog, which is most important. Dog, Stanley, shout out.
Yeah.
But
I think actually everyone has comparison with
Yeah.
Jordy right now.
It's crazy. We were just on a podcast with someone
Yeah.
and they called out the same thing.
I think like I think it's just like a natural
It's a
thing.
natural thing. It's like you're looking for, like, I don't know, you're just like looking for a worse situation than yours.
for sure.
And like in some ways I feel like it's protected. It like reminds you of like what you have, which can be great. But at the same time, it's like a minimizing thing to do. Like,
too, is it's like it feels like my grief is kind of in the past and yours is happening right now.
Yeah, although your grief is still
your
happening.
grief is still
Yeah.
happening.
It's
yeah,
just-
yeah. No, for sure. But it's like to Erica, to your point, like, you know, losing your daughter, it's like you hit a point where you can't do anything about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And we're both in that stage.
Right.
And Jordy's in a totally different
Yeah, so
stage.
you're in like the active decision making stage and
Yeah.
active in it.
Yeah.
And like grief still impacts like my parenting,
Yeah.
my relationship, like every single day. But I think it's really natural. And like most people, sorry, I'm sure you don't love that, but are like naturally comparing
Right,
them.
they're like, oh, but like I don't have terminal brain cancer.
Yeah.
So like it's like my shit isn't that big of a deal. But like what I was saying to this person this morning was like, I actually love when people are like telling me their stuff because
Yeah.
it makes me feel normal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like I don't want people to tiptoe around me.
Because that was your role. Like people would come to you.
People would just come to me and like talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And like I was like always like, I don't know, a person that people would confide in. And so when
You
people
have that energy. And you still, I mean, you very much.
Yeah, you still do.
I
You
do.
have that
But I know
energy.
like the people in my life are like, oh, I don't want to like burden you. And like, I don't want to like, you know, like even on the podcast with my mom, you know, like she was just like, I didn't want to put more on your plate. And I'm just like, when you don't do that, it makes me feel like less capable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like less whatever. So it's like, I just appreciate people being like,
Jordy
very
is
honest
telling
and
everyone,
open.
bring me your shit.
Yeah, bring me all your shit, everyone.
Listen, when Susanna and I came and brought you and Hank dinner,
Yes.
we were like, so, do you want to hear some like work shit?
Yeah, and I was like, give me all the
We were like,
tea.
Please. We were like scrounging stuff up from months
Well, you
ago.
probably get it, right? After like
Yeah.
losing, you're like,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. And then, but I also have this thing too, which is the opposite, and that's like the really mean spirited side of me, where somebody's like hysterical over their 98-year-old grandma dying,
Yeah.
and I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, what did you think was gonna happen?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean-
truly, what did you think was gonna happen? Like, she was 98, she lived a long life, she fucking died. Like, what? Like,
Yeah, that's
Right,
like
that's
that's
the
like an
trajectory.
in order death.
right,
Like
people are like really upset. Like, of course you're gonna be upset.
Right, like you can be sad about it, but it's not like unexpected.
Totally.
Like the
And I
only
feel-
guarantee is that like we're all headed in that direction.
literally 100%.
But
It's like-
we're acutely aware of that, and the rest of the world is maybe in a little bit of denial.
Yeah.
That like they're like trying to escape that.
Totally.
from
I'm
happening.
over here like, you should be so lucky that they live to be 98. And
Yeah.
it's like the fact that you're like in bed eating, you know, chocolate, like fucking devastated for weeks is like,
Yeah.
get your shit together. Like,
Well,
what's
my
wrong with
grandma
you?
died
I know.
2 months before Jordy got diagnosed
Oh,
with
I'm
brain
sorry. See,
cancer.
like, how insensitive.
And I was like, I was just like, I'm so grateful that like my grandmother got to live a life.
Yeah, no, she like, very much took that same approach. Like
I was like,
she was so happy she got to live a full life. And
Yeah.
But see, you have the gratitude piece where
Yeah.
I'm like, what's your problem?
yeah.
Like,
And
it's not that.
I was just like, and that made me even more, it just like brings things into focus more of like, no, out of order. Like my baby dying, nope, out of order.
Yes.
Like dad dying, nope. It's like, that's not the
Right.
time you're supposed, quote
Yeah.
unquote, supposed
Yeah.
to die. Yeah, death is like, it's scary to talk about.
it is. People like have a lot of anxiety around it. I mean, probably because we don't really know anything about it.
There's like no certainty.
And there's no certainty
Totally.
except for that it's going to happen, which is terrible. Like,
I think
kind
there are
of
people
terrifying.
out there who think that
It's
they're
not going to happen.
immortal. I'm sure there
That
are
is
people.
my worst fear. I'm like,
I don't want to be alive forever.
I think we could probably find like a subreddit around people who think they're
maybe we
immortal.
should bring on someone like that.
Yeah, we
My
should.
best friend, Hannah, I'll say her name. She's great. She's not serious, but she's always like, oh, I'm going to be immortal. And I'm like, girl, you're going to be
Alone.
So you're out of here. So like you're
Yeah.
on your own. Like we're not trying to be immortal with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna be you and
I wanted my dog to be immortal.
that for sure.
That, yeah.
100%.
No, their lives are way too short.
like
Yeah.
Completely agree.
that's like a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like animals can be immortal.
Yeah.
Or at
But-
least like live as long as we do. Like when I picture
Yeah.
myself getting older, like I picture
Stanley.
like Stanley with gray hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that.
You know?
I get that.
But yeah, I think it's like a weird one. It's just a weird and like
Yeah.
the comparison thing is just it's like totally ever present. And I do kind of find it coming out at like nasty times. So
Yeah.
when people are like, oh, I'm really sad about such and such. And I'm like,
Right.
You're like, yeah,
I get
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
and then my brother will be like, that was mean.
But I understand it. It's like when you've been through something like traumatic and you've had like this huge loss in your life, and then someone is like either sweating the small stuff or like really upset about something that doesn't feel comparable. Like I understand that feeling.
But then it's like, I still sweat the small stuff. I'm sure you still do.
Yeah.
I'm sure you still are like, like Frankie and Finn are like losing their minds and Brody wants to be in the car for 3.5 hours, like honking the horn, and like you're still annoyed.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. No, like
It's like life's those little
like,
moments
life
still
goes
matter.
on.
I think too, it's, you in that time, and I don't know if this also had to do with how I handle the grief in my dad's death currently, is I spent, my high school years having death be just a very kind of like discussion piece kind of within, and it wasn't a space where I was supposed to be feeling any feelings. I was supposed to be helping other like kids through those feelings. And I think that it was healing for me. I have no doubt. I'm not quite sure in what way, but I think that it also helped shape a little bit of the lack thereof of very emotional response I have when I do speak about it.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think that it's a great option. I think that group was a great fit for me. I think that one-on-one therapy is a great fit for other people.
Yeah.
I think that whatever your own path is a great path, but being able to talk about it with so many other kids that know exactly what you're dealing with,
Right.
which I'm sure, Jordy, like with other, people that you've spoken to that are in a similar situation, it's just, it hits different.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think groups can be really powerful. And I know for Hank, like the caregiving group that he's been a part of has been like really instrumental in his mental health and feeling like seen and heard and understood. So I totally agree with you. I think groups can be really, really healing. I'm wondering really quick, you've mentioned a few times that like I don't know what the word you just used was, but like less emotional or like not that emotional when you're talking about your dad and his death. Are there other things in your life that like do make you really emotional? Like, do you have a really emotional response to other things? Or is this more of like your status quo?
So I have a lot of emotional responses. I feel my feelings in a very big way, with really the exception of that. So I feel like I'm relatively quick to tears. But it could be happy. It could be a commercial. It could really be like anything like ask Michael, like there's times where we'll be
like
watching
the farmer's dog commercial.
there was a beer
got me.
commercial with a dog, and the dog, it was just in the snow, and I just started crying. Like the dog was fine.
Yeah.
It was just like in the snow. But I do feel my feelings when in other situations 100%. And I think that it's funny because it's like, if it is like, say it's like a conflict with someone or something like that, like I feel my emotions in a really big way.
You just won't communicate that.
Yes. Right. And when I'm speaking about my dad, it's similar, but when it comes to just like, any frustration, for example, if I'm doing or a really bad day at work or something like that, like it doesn't take a whole lot for kind of like the tears. And sometimes I won't even know why I'm crying. I'm just like, I don't know, the tears are coming down. But, I think that it's definitely an interesting observation I've noticed about myself, where I feel all of these feelings that I would have thought I would feel when I would talk about my dad, and just get upset and, have a little bit of a difficult time getting through, similar to kind of how my mom is. And I have no problem with it. But then it's something as small as like, I couldn't get the duvet cover on the comforter.
Yeah.
I got like really upset about it.
I mean, to be fair,
and I was so
Ramsey will attest. Those are the worst.
I was really frustrated, and I just felt my feelings about it, in a big way. And it's kind of, I think it's not even necessarily with just my dad. You know, my grandfather died, when I was in high school, and I remember I handled it in a very similar way, where I went to the funeral. I don't remember getting terribly upset. I was just kind of like, you know, okay, I know the people around me are going to be really upset. So, you know, what can I do to kind of like not be upset or not add to it or not? And, I think that that's something that my mom has kind of taught me, is she is like the most excellent person in a crisis, or if there's like a tragedy or something going on, like she just gets stuff done, and she can organize, and she can do, and, you know, she can feel all her feelings, and she will be, you know, emotional and things like that. But she just like, I don't even know how she does it. She just gets things done. Like she organized, you know, she'll organize everything. She had a huge party for my dad at our house after the funeral, like hosted a couple hundred people at my house. Wild. And she just like, just totally gets it done. And so I think that I like to think that I kind of have like half of that, where I'm like, okay, what can we do? How can I help? How can I handle this? How can I like not add to any of all of these huge emotions and feelings going on right now, and kind of be like a stable
I think you are that
person,
way, which is like a strength in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So it's definitely, it's interesting. I feel like self-aware of how I handle things in different situations. And so I certainly do feel like my feelings in an emotional response when it comes to lots of other aspects in my life. But, when it comes to, you know, talking about my dad and things like that, it's not like an emotional, which is, you know, and I thought maybe it would like change. Like I thought maybe it would change. I thought maybe that when we got married, like I thought during my wedding, like I'm going to feel it, or walking down the aisle. Like I think people were joking when Michael and I did our vows, like Michael like cried. It was so sweet. When we did our first look, he cried. It was so sweet. And I laughed. Like, I don't even know what, God. Like, I think it was just like, okay, he was doing enough for the both of us. But, when it comes to things with like myself, like getting frustrated or making a mistake, or like, I'm very quick to have an emotional kind of response. Yeah. So it's interesting when it involves really just me. I'm much more emotional and upset, but when there's other people involved.
Well, I feel like that fits like who you are. Like you're like a helper, and you want to like make everyone feel good and make everybody feel okay. And like I imagine the idea of taking up space with like your own emotional stuff feels yucky to you in a situation where there's lots of people that are feeling big feelings.
Yeah.
You could always feel your big feelings around us, Nicole.
Yeah, there's room for you.
There's room
I appreciate that. As like I've like quintuple texted you guys like multiple times.
Now I have so many urges to go back to my text and be like, I wonder which of these did I make Nicole really anxious.
No, I really appreciate that. But I mean, grief has a very interesting way of shaping.
Yeah, like it seeps into you, like it changes you.
It changes you, and I think that, you know, the 9, like being like you're susceptible to all of the things. You're so not developed yet that there's so much. And I think there's no doubt that I handle certain things the way I do because of that. And that was 23 years ago. Right. So, it comes in different forms. It comes differently for people. And I think that it's always interesting when you speak to someone that does like a suddenly versus maybe what
Yeah.
more anticipated, or if it's depending on where you are in your life. I mean, it no matter what, at what stage in life, it shapes you in one form or another. I think for me, I was just in such like a weird, like, you know, you're young, but you're like not super young, but you're not like a tween. You're kind of like, and I have no doubt that that's kind of how it shaped me for sure. And I think that it also, with the group, so we used to run a couple miles of the marathon, the LA Marathon, and we would put pictures of our person on our shirts, and it would say like, I'm running in like memory of so-and-so. And I would always run like the last like 2 miles because I wanted the medal, and I would just tell everyone that I ran the marathon.
That's
like,
amazing.
I definitely didn't run the marathon. But I think that it, like things like that, like I would look forward to doing that every year. And I think I would look forward to, we would do like the grief holiday party with like the kids. Like it's so insane to think about. There were parts of it where I would like look forward to going to.
That's how you find like community and like understanding.
Yeah, right. And it's a very weird thing to think about. But as a kid, I'm like the pain and the sadness started to like come to par with the excitement that I had to go to group or to go to Gayukaku with, my mom's new boyfriend or whatever, things like that. And so I think that anyone who goes through a loss, I would hope that they would be fortunate enough to find their path, whatever path it may be, that brings them to a place where they're finding, as weird as it is to say, you kind of find the joy in the community and like the loss, which is like a really weird thing to think about and like talk about,
true.
It is, yeah. But that's like the whole goal, right? Is to like make you feel less alone and less isolated in your experience. And that's exactly what happened for you and your mom. That's the hard part, right? Is like when something, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about. Like you said, like initially, like everyone's there and it's like everyone's in it with you, and then like things get quieter.
Yeah.
And what that experience was like for you when like the support sort of like dwindles, the daily like support, I guess.
I think like my brother and I are super close, and I feel like I've always had him.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really feel like I needed or like wanted necessarily like support from anyone else.
Yeah.
Kind of. Like I don't.
Because he like knows, like you guys have that. You're the only two people in the world who knows what it was like to live in your house and have your dad be your dad.
1,000%. And even though we both had like totally different experiences of him in like a lot of ways, I think like when it becomes weird is just like, I don't know, it's like we like still joke about it and whatnot, and like people are just like uncomfortable around it, and I'm kind of like, no, I want to talk. Like, I want to talk about my dad. And like, luckily Dakota, my husband, is like super open to
That's great.
He like loves hearing everything.
That's so nice.
But I find that, and my friends are too, but it's just, I also like need to find a way to talk about him that doesn't like start with a dead dad joke. I think it would probably like help out maybe my friends,
ease them along.
But like maybe I could like make it easier to have
Ease
that
them into it.
conversation.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, when you meet someone new, like how do you introduce your dad? Like how do you bring, like when you have someone like important join your life, like how do you incorporate your dad into that relationship, or how do you include him?
I find that like I talk about him a lot in like a work context because we were in like similar lines of work, even though he was like in like a much larger scale than me.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about him like in that context. Yeah. I guess also like this sounds weird too, but it's like I haven't had like that hard of a time just being like, oh yeah, like I'm Ryan, like this is my husband, like this is my mom, my dad's dead. Like it's just not like that. It's not like doesn't feel weird to me. And so I think like once I get past that with people, then I can like talk about it more. But again, like I need to find a way that is that without like the preceding weird
Well, you maybe don't need to. I mean, if it feels okay for you,
Yeah, but I
that's
also
okay.
like, I don't know. It feels like kind of callous in a way. Like, but it's like my way of kind of
Yeah,
like easing
for sure.
myself into it. I guess.
Sure. But you like are like a funny, like
Yeah.
bubbly person, so like
Yeah.
it feels on brand for
For sure.
you to like.
Well, it's like if people aren't
Make light of
comfortable,
it.
that's on them.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yes,
Right. It's
yeah.
like not on you to like make people feel comfortable about your dad's death.
I think like what's going to be interesting is like Dakota and I do want to have a family, and so I
Mhm.
think what's going to be interesting is like when we have a kid, or
Yeah.
hopefully kids if we can. Like
What that's going to be like.
yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
I feel like it's going to be like I want it to be like oh like your papa, like your grandpa, and are they going to
Yeah.
be like where's this guy at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know what that's going to look like, but I
Yes.
want them to be like super present because my mom's dad died when I was like 5.
Yeah.
And she was really close with him, and she talked about him all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we felt like we knew him.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, like, but the difference is we did know him.
Sure.
Right.
For a short time. Like, I feel like I might be thrusting on my kid, like, you know, Papa said.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like, what?
that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But again, like grief just evolves over time with every stage of life. Grief just like shows up and continues to show up differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I think there is a big part of it that is like a lot of gratitude, though, like as time goes on, because it's like I had a better, like more fulfilling relationship with my dad in like 25 years than a lot of people have in like 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
The quality of it.
Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
it's like I feel really, really grateful for that. And like, and I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's like he's just like always around because he was a really like present person. And I feel like he continues to be really present, which is
Yeah.
probably also why like the idea of my mom dating is just
Hard.
Yeah.
like that's true.
What does it like press up against for you? Like when you think about your mom dating?
Well, I'm just like, now that's like another person that I need to like worry about. You know, I'm like, that's like another. I'm like,
Yeah.
what,
Meaning your mom?
Well,
Or
'cause it's
whoever
like, my mom is
joins
like pretty happy right now, and I'm like, well, what if what if she dates someone and they like fuck around with that, or what if they're like a dirty John? Like, have you guys seen?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like a number one fear
Yeah.
for me. Is
Probably very low likelihood.
You love those
I
those
love true
podcasts.
crime.
Yeah, when you listen to true crime, it feels like it ups the
Yeah.
likelihood.
Like I've done a background check on everyone that she's even flirted with.
Wow, I
feel
love
like
it.
I understand.
You know, and
Like,
like I
yeah.
found out some stuff, and I was
Wow.
like, hey, heads up. Like,
So that's really reinforcing. Now you
like,
you
it
believe.
wasn't like criminal behavior. It was more like, hey, like lived in a lot of different houses. Like, what's up with that? Like, what's up with all the moving?
Mm.
Like, maybe there's a bankruptcy. Like, maybe.
Oh, okay. So it's a lot of inferences you're making
No,
about
that
the
was-
move.
This sounds like you.
Bankruptcy
Yeah.
was
Like
there.
doing
Oh.
detective
Bankruptcy
work.
was there, and it was relevant. And I was like, if he's a little weird this week,
Yeah.
it's because there's an auction.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest takeaway I have for you is text me back.
Yeah.
We're gonna text you. I'm gonna quintuple text you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm going to be real nervous.
Real nervous. Well, I so appreciate you coming on and sharing so much about something we really didn't know about. And I like go back to that your bridal shower
Yeah.
and of like,
Yeah.
oh wait, I'm missing something. Like I didn't realize. So
I don't talk about it.
Well, it's like kind of crazy because it's like we've been friends for, I don't know, a long time, decades, a decade and a half probably, and this isn't something that we've ever like talked about, you know. And it's like obviously a big part of your
I
life.
have a lot of friends whose dads have died, which is like really
Yeah.
terrible. And like I feel like I've never talked about it really with any of them.
Yeah, like that's just so interesting. It's like not something that people talk about, but it's obviously this huge piece of everybody's life who's experienced it. And so I'm like just grateful that we have this so that we can learn more about our friends and like honor your people and yeah.
Yeah.
To like get an inside view on things.
No, I think it's nice. I think this is the most I've talked about it since high school.
Wow.
Wow. Well, we're always here to talk about it with you.
I appreciate that. And so, yeah, I think that it's great. This was great.
Yeah.
This is great.
This is great.
We love you and we're grateful that you're open
Oh,
Jordy, you
okay.
have to cross your arms
Oh, okay.
and hold my hand. Jordy
Oh,
would virtually do
okay,
it. So
I'm
we would
fine.
do, at the end of each group, we would do a squeeze where you all stand up and you hold each other's hands.
Okay, sweet.
Aw.
And then you do a squeeze, and that one squeeze travels around the group, and it's to show that there's
Aw.
support and moving forward. So squeeze. Okay,
Oh,
squeeze.
I love
Jordy,
that.
squeeze you. You're gonna squeeze again.
Okay.
I felt
Squeeze,
it.
squeeze. We felt it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you our question that we ask everyone, which is like the version of you now. What would you tell yourself in like the worst thick of it moments of like grieving the loss of your dad, or maybe even before he died? Like those moments that felt like, how am I ever going to get through this?
Yeah, I feel like it was harder before he died. Like I remember sitting in the first time that I flew out on a red eye and was like in the hospital, and I was like wasn't supposed to spend the night there, but it was like empty, and so I was just finding all these weird little pods to sleep in. Like it was weird. Like hospitals are weird.
Yeah.
Big,
Always just,
very
like,
weird.
Weird empty rooms that no one's like observing, and there's always like Dr. Phil on the TV. You could kind of just
Oh, yeah.
be in the corner and no one's
Mhm.
gonna say anything. So I was in one of those, and I was like, Googling like what do you do when someone dies? Because
Yeah.
like, what do you do?
Of course.
And I Googled, like, I knew Google wasn't going to, like, have the answer, but I'm also famous for Googling really specific scenarios. Like, if I said this and my friend said this and then they said this, like, are they mad at me?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, you were like doing like ChatGPT before ChatGPT was a thing
like,
with
it was just
Google.
more on, like, Yahoo Answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, like, somebody else who had, like, a shockingly similar
Wow.
scenario.
Yeah.
I'd be like, thank you.
Yes.
But
So
so I was
funny.
Googling, like, what happens after you die, and something that I found was, like, the, like, theory of matter, basically. It's like can't be created or destroyed, and like it exists with us all the time. And I think that made me feel a lot better at the time, like in that moment, just
Yeah.
like his energy will live forever. And I think I would tell myself in that moment that like that's totally true. That's
Yeah.
not just like a thing that
You read on Google.
I read on Google. Shout out Google.
Yeah.
Like shout outs here.
A lot of shout outs.
Google Stan. But yeah, I think it's like he's like around and he's present in my relationship, even though my husband has never met him, and he's present in my like day to day with
Yeah.
my job. Like the amount of times that if I like close a deal and I have like the visceral thought of like I'm gonna text my dad.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's not sad though. Like it's not a
Yeah.
sad thought. It's just like a true thought. It's
Yes.
like, oh, I'm gonna tell him.
Yeah.
And then I just tell him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In like your own way. It's like a sweet knowing
Yeah.
feeling.
So, like, feel very connected to him.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And I think that's like
something
I hope that feels like a hopeful thing for some people that are listening that are maybe in the thick of it, that like just because someone isn't physically here doesn't mean you can't feel their presence and like you can't continue to have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Because you can.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would tell myself, that I did tell myself at the time, and I would continue to tell myself, and that I would tell anyone who's feeling any kind of grief in any kind of way, is that whatever you're feeling is fine.
Mhm.
Like that sticks with me so hard, and I tell myself that multiple times.
Love me
a
some
week.
self-validation.
Yes.
Yeah, and like my friends are probably super overhearing it.
It's so true though. I don't think you can
it's a good
overhear
one. You
it.
can't overdo it.
It's just like whatever. It's just whatever it is.
Is.
Cool. And my dad used to say he'd be pissed if I didn't say this, and like in a public forum at any opportunity that I'm going to. His big life saying was, "Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want."
Mm.
I like that.
So
Yeah.
And I like actually feel like that's kind of true
Mm-hmm.
for me, because like I definitely like didn't want brain cancer.
Yeah.
But like I feel like it's pushed me in a lot of ways to like do things that I never would have done otherwise. And so that's like me getting the experience
Yeah.
from like a shitty situation. So
yeah.
thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Jordy. He would have loved you guys.
Oh,
Loved
that's
you guys.
sweet.
Well,
So
thank you
much.
for coming.
Yeah, I was
It's been
so
so lovely to chat with you, and we hope that you had fun and
Yeah.
feel safe.
Next time.
wasn't as scary as you thought.
Yeah,
No,
no.
not at all.
Okay,
I'm
good.
gonna go try and hug your baby.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Grief Street. We put out new episodes every Monday. If you'd like to support us, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to find the video version of our episodes. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a 5-star review. We would love to hear from you and get some feedback. If you'd like to contact us, please email griefstreetpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 508-474-3378. That's 508-GRIEFST. Our theme song is Hepcat Jive, courtesy of purpleplanet.com. We'll see you next time.